Chapter 316. The Diamond 7 Epic Storm Long-Winged Falcon lay obediently on the ground. Endless Summer said with a smile, "There's no need to go through so much trouble. There's no need to go through so much trouble. This falcon flies very fast." When Lin Yuan saw it, he nodded in agreement. Weren't falcons the fastest flying birds? Lin Yuan, Endless Summer, and the mother of Bloodbath rode on the storm long-winged falcon's back and headed for the royal capital. After flying for just over a day, it was as though the world had changed. They had left the northern direction, and the snow could no longer be seen. Lin Yuan looked at the vast mountains and rivers below the storm long-winged falcon with a calm expression. At that moment, Lin Yuan felt that his training in the controlled Class 3 Abyss Dimensional Rift and the harvest in the depths of the Endless Forest had greatly improved him. Now, Lin Yuan was going to return to the royal capital and was preparing to apply for his guild club during the S tournament. He would now return to the royal capital and prepare to take advantage of the start of the S tournament in the next few months to apply for his guild club. Even if the floating island whale had yet to hatch, Lin Yuan would return to the royal capital and prepare to apply for his guild club during these few months. Even if the floating island whale had not hatched yet, Lin Yuan could first outline the embryonic form of his personal strength. After everything was done, the Radiance 100 sequence selection should begin. The Diamond 7 Epic Storm Long-Winged Falcon flew all the way and took less than 2 days to reach the royal capital. The Diamond 7 Epic Storm Long-Winged Falcon was much faster than the Diamond Divine Travel Black Swallow. However, the Storm Long-Winged Falcon was very violent and was a ferocious bird that was adept at attacking. Had it not been for the two suzerain myth phase, Endless Summer and the mother of Bloodbath, holding it back, this Storm Long-Winged Falcon would not have been so obedient and sent the three of them back to the royal capital. Some of the Radiance Federation's organizations that rented Flying Phase would have thought of capturing the Storm Long-Winged Falcon to nurture. The Storm Long-Winged Falcon might be relatively docile to the Creation Master who nurtured it to evolve and increase its grade. However, it was obviously unrealistic to send the Storm Long-Winged Falcon to fly as a passenger. Unless the Creation Master was willing to be the driver on the Storm Long-Winged Falcon's back. This was the only way to ensure that the Storm Long-Winged Falcon wouldn't casually attack others. However, it was obviously impossible for a Creation Master to be the pilot. The Creation Master who could nurture the Storm Long-Winged Falcon would at least be a Class 3 Creation Master. No organization that rented Flying Phase would be able to afford the price of a Creation Master of such a rank as a pilot. On the Storm Long-Winged Falcon's back, he had ordered a Diamond Fey storage box from Starweb's Ostrich Logistics for Endless Summer. After all, without spatial storage equipment like the Diamond Fey storage box to store personal items, everything would be inconvenient. In the past, Endless Summer was still in the form of a plant and didn't need to store any items. However, now that Endless Summer had taken human form, there had to be a place to store all the resources and loot that Endless Summer had obtained. At that time, Lin Yuan had looked at Endless Summer's body weaponization bracelet. After these pink and purple hydrangeas become smaller, they look like bells on the bracelet. As a result, when customizing the Diamond Fey storage box, Endless Summer had expressed that she wanted to customize the Diamond Fey storage box into the shape of a pink and purple bell. He then mysteriously expressed that he would hang the pinkish-purple bell-shaped Diamond Fey storage box on the bracelet as a pendant. It was originally a very ordinary statement, but it made Lin Yuan's eyes narrow. Endless Summer looked very gentle and was dressed in a pink and purple silk dress like a lady. But her thoughts seemed a little deep. No matter what the Diamond Fey storage box looked like, anyone who understood Diamond Fey storage boxes would still be able to recognize it at a glance. Endless Summer had customized this Diamond Fey storage box into the shape of a pink and purple bell and hung it on her body weaponization bracelet. It was equivalent to using the pink and purple bell-shaped Diamond Fey storage box as a smokescreen. It would make people feel that this body weaponization bracelet was an accessory to match the pink and purple bell-shaped Diamond Fey storage box. It would weaken the presence of the body weaponization bracelet. Therefore, if there was really a conflict, there was a high chance that people would not look at the body weaponization bracelet on Endless Summer's wrist. Endless Summer's attack method was a spiritual attack. Therefore, As long as Endless Summer activated the body weaponization bracelet, it would be able to instantly release an extremely powerful spiritual attack. This pinkish-purple bell-shaped diamond Fey storage box was equivalent to giving Endless Summer's body weaponization bracelet a chance to launch a sneak attack every time it attacked. In Lin Yuan's opinion, this was simply black-bellied. However, it was also in line with the way of survival for Feys. After arriving at the royal capital, Lin Yuan did not return to his mansion immediately. Instead, he headed straight for the Leaning Moon Mountain and the Radiant Moon Palace. At that moment, the mother of Bloodbath brought Endless Summer to buy a cell phone. Along the way, the mother of Bloodbath and Endless Summer also went to apply for a new Star Web card. At the same time, they also bought some daily necessities. However, the mother of Bloodbath was a little disappointed. While the mother of Bloodbath had been selling all kinds of delicacies to Endless Summer was not very interested. When Endless Summer got the cell phone and saw those exquisite accessories and clothes, her eyes lit up. Lin Yuan felt that after this Fey reached suzerain myth, one of the two beside him had the foodie attribute, while the other had awakened the attribute of buying good-looking accessories. This caused Lin Yuan's perception of myth breed Feys to change. No matter what grade a Fey reached, in front of an unguarded person, it was just like an ordinary person. It was a very lively life with 7 emotions and 6 desires. Lin Yuan returned to the royal capital and was preparing to go to the Leaning Moon Mountain's Radiant Moon Palace as his first stop. At that moment, the Moon Empress was standing in the Radiant Moon Palace's inner palace's breeding room, in front of a rather strange long porcelain table. This long porcelain table did not look very smooth and had a slight curve. The surface of the long porcelain table looked very smooth, and it should be very difficult for such a curve to be placed on this long porcelain table. It would not fall off the surface of this long porcelain table. However, there were still many things on this table. When the things on the table were placed on this long porcelain table, they seemed to be attracted by this long porcelain table. The long white porcelain table was constantly emitting a majestic water elemental energy. This majestic water element energy was even denser than the water element pearls that Lin Yuan had induced to spit out in the spirit lock spatial zone. Chapter 10 End of this chapter. Chapter 3:17. But the aquamarine elemental shellfish was a living creature. But this white curved table was clearly a dead object. At that moment, Caicha, who was standing beside the Moon Empress, poured a cup of tea that was brewed with the leaves of the dark flower dreamy fragrant tea. Caicha placed the tea brewed with the leaves of the Dutchman's dream fragrant tea on the curved white porcelain table and said softly, "Moon Empress, your pearl hairpin jade 9-petal plum blossom is blooming better and better." Upon hearing that, the Moon Empress stopped trimming the jade hairpin 9-petal plum's branches. The Moon Empress looked at the jade hairpin 9-petal plum blossom that she had just trimmed. The jade hairpin plum blossom produced by the jade hairpin 9-petal plum would only bloom once every 3 years if it wasn't for the water elemental energy provided by the whalebone. When Caicha heard the Moon Empress words, she couldn't help but scratch her head and had an awkward expression. Caicha had always thought that the Moon Empress used the whalebone to make the long table so that she wouldn't have to water the jade hairpin 9-petal plum blossom. He didn't expect that the Moon Empress was actually trying to speed up the jade hairpin 9-petal plum blossom's maturation. The material used for this long porcelain table was the whalebone of a Myth 3 cetacean Fey. The Myth 3 whale Fey's whalebone was far more precious than this jade hairpin 9-petal plum. Although the jade hairpin 9-petal plum was a heaven and earth spirit treasure, its effects were rather weak compared to other heaven and earth spirits. This was because the jade hairpin plum blossom's petals could only protect one's hair. However, this kind of hair-protecting ability was rather unorthodox among heaven and earth spirit treasures. However, it was very useful for some specific Feys. For example, if some furry animal species Feys used the jade hairpin 9-petaled plum's petals, the jade hairpin 9-petaled plum's petals wouldn't be able to withstand it. It could greatly increase the brightness and luster of the fur. For example, the Moon Empress always used the jade hairpin 9-petal plum's petals to concoct spirit fluids for her contracted Fey, the Calamity sun-swallowing fox. Of course, the jade hairpin 9-petal plum blossom was especially sought after because it could cure baldness. Reduce receding hairline. Therefore, the price was directly raised to a sky-high price. However, if the Moon Empress wasn't in the mood to prune the plum branches, she wouldn't be able to do so. He probably didn't even have the qualifications to be brought to the rear hall. However, when Caicha thought about it, she realized that the Radiant Moon Palace had precious spiritual items that couldn't be seen in the outside world. After all, the Moon Empress had casually nurtured them and placed them in a corner to collect dust. However, Caicha didn't know that when the Moon Empress was trimming the branches, she wasn't trimming the flowers but the heart. The Moon Empress was still trimming the jade hairpin 9-petal plum blossom. Unknowingly, the jade hairpin eternal plum blossom had been trimmed down by the Moon Empress. From the Moon Empress' point of view, life was like a branch. No matter how he cut it, he would always feel that something was not perfect after the first cut and the next cut. However, the Moon Empress pruning method was different. The Moon Empress would only keep what she wanted and cut off what she felt was unnecessary. As he continued to cut, he managed to create the flavor of the wind rises and the winter becomes cold, the winter plum blossoms bloom in the evening. The jade hairpin 9-petal plum blossom produced numerous and messy plum blossoms. It became a little tacky because there were too many of them. The jade-like 9-petal hairpin flower bloomed on the plum branches as though it was covered with a layer of snow. However, under the Moon Empress pruning, the jade hairpin 9-petal plum blossom now had 9 plum blossoms and 9 petals. In addition, the plum branches were bold and had a hint of elegance, making it look very perfect. The Moon Empress looked at the jade hairpin 9-petal plum blossom that she was more and more satisfied with. There is a special charm in the fragrance, and it doesn't know the cold. It is going to be a new year soon. Before Caicha could understand the meaning of the Moon Empress words, Mystic Moon's clear voice came from the rear hall's door. Moon Empress, young lord is back. The Moon Empress, who was about to continue trimming the jade hairpin 9-petal plum blossom, immediately put down her hand. There was an elegant smile on his face. Mystic Moon, roast one of the 2 spirit savory pigs that you brought back from Chef Supreme. Mystic Moon immediately accepted the order and went to make the arrangements. Lin Yuan was already in front of the Radiant Moon Palace's door. When he saw the 2 silver stamen gold luster caches in front of the Radiant Moon Palace, he realized that the current scene was very different from when he had left 1.5 months ago. The silver stamen gold luster cassia that had become lush but didn't have a willpower rune and maintained its grade at Diamond X Legend was still lush and full of silver stamen gold luster cassia flowers. However, the silver stamen gold luster cassia that had comprehended a willpower rune but had dropped a tree of flowers and green leaves and had fallen into a deep sleep. At this time, the tree was already full of tender leaves. Although its height was similar to that of the Diamond X Legend silver stamen gold luster cassia, it had comprehended a willpower rune and reached suzerain. The newly grown tender leaves were filled with flower buds. The flower buds hid gold and silver, and it looked very different from the silver stamen gold luster cassia's silver stamen gold luster cassia. The suzerain silver stamen gold luster cassia had comprehended a willpower rune, and its newly grown tender leaves were filled with flower buds. If the suzerain silver stamen gold luster cassia's flowers were like stars, the suzerain silver stamen gold luster cassia's silver stamen gold luster cassia's flower bud was like a small sun. It shone with a bright gold-silver luster. When this suzerain silver stamen gold luster cassia reached Fantasy V, it would welcome its first world cleansing and become a myth breed. Lin Yuan entered the Radiant Moon Palace's inner palace with ease. He immediately saw his master, the Moon Empress, sitting there waiting for him. Upon seeing Lin Yuan in the inner palace, Caicha immediately poured a cup of spirit tea from the jade porcelain teapot on the table and handed it to Lin Yuan. Young lord, it's dry and windy outside. Drink some spirit tea to moisten your throat. Lin Yuan took the spirit tea and took a sip. Auntie Caicha's tea is still the same as before. It's so mellow and fragrant. The Moon Empress picked up a red and green spirit fruit from the table and peeled the skin. In just 2 or 3 strokes, the skin of the spirit fruit was completely peeled off. The Moon Empress handed it to Lin Yuan and asked, "What about the Radiance 100 sequence? Didn't you say that you'll only be back before the Radiance 100 sequence test?" Why is it so early? Did something happen? After taking the spirit fruit from the Moon Empress, Lin Yuan took a bite, and the fruit fragrance burst in his mouth. The rich fruit fragrance was accompanied by abundant juice, and it was very sweet. The Radiant Moon Palace's spirit fruit was not a particularly precious variety. Instead, it was a kind of apple that could be sold in the market. However, the Radiant Moon Palace's apple was grown from a diamond apple tree. Although it was the same thing, it tasted very different. Caicha watched as the Moon Empress peeled off the diamond apple skin and peeled it so perfectly. She could not help but recall the first time the Moon Empress peeled an apple for the young lord, and she seemed to be a little flustered. Chapter 11 End of this chapter. Chapter 3:18. In the past few months, the Moon Empress had done many things that she wouldn't normally do. In this world, the only person who could make the Moon Empress peel an apple personally was probably the young lord. When Lin Yuan heard the Moon Empress question, he took a bite of the peeled apple and placed it on the table. The training has ended early. I came back earlier to celebrate the new year with Master. The Moon Empress had been worried that Lin Yuan had encountered some problems. Now that he heard it, the smile on his face immediately became even wider. He pointed to the lotus pond not far away and said, "These lotus fays in the lotus pond have all been promoted to suzerain. The lotus root powder made from the ground lotus roots of these suzerain lotus fays is the most delicious. In addition to the osmanthus flowers from the suzerain silver stamen gold luster cassia outside the Radiant Moon Palace, I can ask Mystic Moon to cook the silver stamen gold luster cassias, osmanthus flowers and the lotus roots of these lotus fays to make lotus root powder and osmanthus candy." When Caicha heard the Moon Empress words, she couldn't help but shiver. Isn't it too exaggerated for the Moon Empress to dote on the young lord? The essence of the suzerain lotus flower fay was in the lotus seeds and lotus roots. Although lotus seeds were rarer than lotus roots and could only be produced once every 3 years, lotus roots could be produced every year. However, how rare were the osmanthus flowers from the suzerain lotus fays lotus roots and the suzerain silver stamen gold luster cassia? At that moment, those suzerain lotus fays in the lotus pond in the rear palace had already developed considerable intelligence. After hearing the words of the Moon Empress, they all trembled. These lotus fays, which had risked their lives to break through to the suzerain grade in order to stay in the Radiant Moon Palace's inner palace, could not help but have doubts. Back then, he had spent so much effort to stand out from his own kind and evolve to the Lord tier. Why? He had thought that he had become a winner in life, but now it seemed that his brothers who had been moved to the garden outside the palace were better off. In the future, every time His Highness came, the lotus root that he had painstakingly grown would be shortened. After dinner, Lin Yuan and the Moon Empress had a question-and-answer session. The Moon Empress couldn't help but be rather surprised from the question-and-answer session. It seemed like her disciple had grown a lot in the past 2 months. This was because only when a person stood at a certain height could they ask questions that needed to be considered at that height. The level of Lin Yuan's questions was obviously much higher than before. The Moon Empress answers were as detailed as possible, and every answer allowed Lin Yuan to understand thoroughly and gain enlightenment. Before leaving the Radiant Moon Palace, Lin Yuan spoke to the Moon Empress seriously. "Master, I've decided to establish my own private force starting this month." The Moon Empress replied with a smile. "Building a private force. If you can make your own force a cloud in the sky, don't make it a mountain that falls to the ground." Ever since Lin Yuan had left the Radiant Moon Palace, he had been thinking about the Moon Empress words. At this time, Shen Yu walked to the back hall and said, "Moon Empress, young lord is planning to establish his own faction. Do you want me to help?" The Moon Empress shook her head. The Moon Empress understood Lin Yuan's nature and principles, so she also understood how independent he was. If it was any other matter, the Moon Empress might be able to help him in secret due to her selfishness as a teacher. However, when it came to matters like private forces, it wasn't something that could be easily helped. As long as the faction controlled by the Moon Empress intervened and helped Lin Yuan, the Moon Empress would not be able to defeat Lin Yuan. That was equivalent to sending a message to the outside world that Lin Yuan's faction was under the protection of the Moon Empress. If that was really the case, The faction that Lin Yuan had painstakingly built would become a vassal of the Radiant Moon Palace in the eyes of the other factions. As a teacher, the Moon Empress would pave the way for her students. However, he would not become a stumbling block in his students' path because of his pampering. The Moon Empress looked at Mystic Moon and said, "My disciple has grown up and wants to explore the world by himself. As his master, I can only guarantee that my disciple will not be bullied by others. As for the rest, let him fly by himself." Mystic Moon was listening to the Moon Empress, but as he listened, he realized that the Moon Empress was looking at him with a strange gaze. There was a proud look in his eyes. The Moon Empress said, "Why am I telling you this? You don't have a disciple, so how can you understand the feelings of a master who has accepted an outstanding disciple?" Xian Yu put on a puzzled expression. He could not help but complain in his heart. "I've long known about His Highness Excellence." QAQ Lin Yuan had walked out of the Radiant Moon Palace and descended the leaning Moon Mountain. Due to the previous question and answer exercise, it was already dusk when he came out. 10 days ago, there was a snowfall in the outskirts of the capital. However, when Lin Yuan returned from the depths of the endless forest in the north, he felt a chill run down his spine. The royal capital had already warmed up. Even in the evening, the temperature wouldn't drop below 15 degrees. Although the temperature in the royal capital was not low, the wind was not small. The night breeze blew the hair in front of Lin Yuan's forehead, revealing his smooth forehead. At this time, the sky was already filled with the sunset glow. The glow fell on the youth's forehead, elongating his silhouette. The training in the controlled Class 3 Abyss Dimensional Rift had given him a yardstick to measure a person's heart. This trip to the endless forest's depths had let him know that this world was very big, and he was still very small. However, the vastness of the world was also urging and attracting Lin Yuan. It made Lin Yuan firmly believe that although he was currently insignificant, he could use his own footsteps to cross the river, step over the mountains, step onto the clouds, and touch the light at the dome. The autumn wind kept blowing on Lin Yuan's body, but Lin Yuan's footsteps became more and more firm. What was the phrase green hills with clear water? It was the phrase calm and unperturbed. This world was really beautiful. In this life, Lin Yuan had a younger sister, a teacher, and friends. Therefore, even if Lin Yuan was not a greedy person, he could not help but have the thought of being intoxicated and not returning. Everything was so calm in the late autumn dusk. However, as he stepped on the thick soil, the sunset glow turned into a cocoon, and his body was covered in the sky. Lin Yuan had completely integrated into this world. There was no longer a trace of the feeling of a transmigrator. Lin Yuan returned to his mansion in the royal capital and could not help but look forward to seeing Wen Yu and Liu Jie. Based on this time, in a few days, Liu Jie would go through the internal channels to conduct the Radiance 100 sequence ranking. Therefore, Liu Jie should have returned to the mansion at this time. After 3 years of silence, Liu Jie was also going to take back the glory that he had protected with his life. However, when Lin Yuan entered his mansion, he was stunned by the scene in front of him. After over a month, the mansion had undergone tremendous changes compared to before Lin Yuan had left. Chapter 12 End of this chapter. Chapter 319. If the previous layout of the mansion was just a simple decoration embryo, then the entire mansion had been refined into a work of art. All of this was obviously done by Hu Quan. In Hu Quan, Lin Yuan could see a kind of spirit craftsman's pursuit of art. He was paranoid and loved it. It was clearly a very tiring thing, but Hu Quan was full of enthusiasm when doing it. The elegance of this mansion was vividly displayed under Hu Quan's design. Due to the 3 Riverland Carp's exclusive skill, Place of Life, the bamboo phase in the 3,000-meter tall bamboo forest absorbed the 250,000 kilogram high-grade energy or debris in the land and kept growing. When the wind blew in the mansion, it would bring a hint of bamboo fragrance. It had a bit of the elegance of the bamboo stream and the green forest. The more Lin Yuan looked at the changes in the mansion, the more he could not help but have a trace of doubt. Could this Class 4 spirit craftsman, Hu Quan, have been sculpting and designing in the mansion without rest day and night? After entering the main mansion's door, Lin Yuan found that the completely jade-textured wood in the mansion was used extremely well. All kinds of completely jade-textured wood were carved into hollows and embedded in the inside of the ceiling walls. The entire ceiling walls exuded that kind of tranquil jade-textured luster. All kinds of completely jade-textured wood-carved ornaments and utensils were placed there. Every detail in the mansion was filled with a natural and warm smell. However, Lin Yuan touched his nose. Although the smell of art came at him, it seemed that the smell of art was far less amazing than the smell of luxury. Liu Jie had pasted a patch made of completely jade-textured wood on the largest wall in the main mansion. On the patch, there were many fine jade-textured wood particles embedded in it. Lin Yuan could already see the rough appearance of the wall seen inlaid with many fine jade-textured wood particles. It was Lin Yuan himself on this wall. Apart from Lin Yuan, there was also Chimey, Genius, Red Thorn, Source Sand, and the blue flash-purple butterfly. There was also Wen Yu, her moonlight egret, and the earth surge golden lotus. There was also Wen Yu, her moonlight egret, and the earth surge golden lotus. There was also Liu Jie and his contracted source-type insect queen. At that moment, Wen Yu was helping Hu Quan in the house. Hu Quan was also carving something. After seeing this wall, Lin Yuan's heart uncontrollably warmed up. Ever since the royal capital's mansion had been constructed, Lin Yuan had never treated it as something that belonged to him. In his opinion, this was his, Liu Jie's, Wen Yu's, and the mother of Bloodbath's common home. But now, he had to add Endless Summer into the family. Although this family had many members, Lin Yuan was the core of this family. Liu Jie was Lin Yuan's retainer knight, Wen Yu was his creation master assistant, the mother of Bloodbath was his path protector, and Endless Summer was his protector. But now, the Class 4 spirit craftsman Hu Quan was working hard to make Lin Yuan feel like he wanted to give employees benefits. Hu Quan's relationship with Liu Jie, Wen Yu, the mother of Bloodbath, and Endless Summer was different. Lin Yuan and Hu Quan only had a special employer-employee relationship. Although Hu Quan had used many of Lin Yuan's completely jade-textured wood, he had worked so hard. However, the things that Liu Jie carved out of the completely jade-textured wood also belonged to Lin Yuan. At the end of the day, when Hu Quan signed the contract, in order to be able to use a large amount of completely jade-textured wood, he signed himself as a tool. At that moment, she suddenly looked up and saw Lin Yuan. At first, Wen Yu thought that her eyes were playing tricks on her. After blinking her eyes, she immediately revealed a pleasantly surprised expression. He ran over happily and said, "Young master, I thought you would only return after the S tournament ends in a month." After saying that, she saw that Lin Yuan was looking at the wall made of completely jade-textured wood fragments. "Young master, Uncle Hu Quan saw that there was no place to use the completely jade-textured wood fragments, so he wanted to make a wall scenery." Lin Yuan looked at the wall scenery that was only half painted. His image was right in the middle of the wall. Beside him were Wen Yu and Liu Jie, and there were quite a few empty seats. At that moment, Lin Yuan's desire to establish his own faction was even stronger. In this life, Lin Yuan was just an 18-year-old youth. Lin Yuan believed that in the process of his growth, the gaps on the wall scenery would be filled by all kinds of people and phase. Whether compared to the red sandalwood longevity fish tank made of completely jade-textured red sandalwood or those carved completely jade-textured ornaments, this wall scenery looked a little inconspicuous. However, in Lin Yuan's opinion, this was the warmest place in the mansion. At that moment, Lin Yuan found that Hu Quan had also put down his work and walked in front of him very solemnly. Lin Yuan saw Hu Quan bow toward him and say in a solemn and grateful tone, "Thank you, Lin Yuan." "Thank you, Lin Yuan." Lin Yuan was a little confused. What did Hu Quan have to thank him for? If he had to say thanks, Hu Quan would not take a single cent of his salary. Lin Yuan felt that he should be the one saying thanks. At that moment, Wen Yu explained at the side. "Young master, Uncle Hu Quan comprehended a willpower rune when he was making this wall scenery a week ago." Lin Yuan did not expect that Hu Quan would have such an opportunity. He could comprehend a willpower rune when he was making this wall scenery. However, Hu Quan did not have to thank him so much for comprehending a willpower rune, right? At that moment, Lin Yuan heard Hu Quan speak. If it weren't for the fact that I felt something when I saw the red sandalwood longevity fish tank that you set up in your manor, and the fact that there were so many completely jade-textured wood that I couldn't figure out when I was carving, I would never have comprehended this willpower rune." As he spoke, Hu Quan, a middle-aged man who looked a little unserious, actually choked a little. Lin Yuan hurriedly said, "Congratulations, Uncle Hu. Congratulations, Uncle Hu. With this willpower rune, Uncle Hu can have another fantasy breed fae." Until then, Lin Yuan still did not understand why Hu Quan was so excited. At that moment, Lin Yuan saw Hu Quan's face suddenly reveal the kind of high spirits that only youths often had. "I only comprehended one willpower rune in the previous half of my life. My spirit craftsman skills have long reached the standard of Class 5. However, the basic requirement to become a Class 5 spirit craftsman is to have 2 fantasy breed fays. I've finally reached it now." At that moment, Lin Yuan finally knew why Hu Quan had been so excited before. As a spirit craftsman, Hu Quan had long regarded spirit craftsmen as more important than spirit chi professionals in this aspect. Chapter 13 End of this chapter. Chapter 320. Otherwise, Hu Quan would not have contracted fays that assisted the spirit craftsman's work. Lin Yuan was truly happy for Hu Quan. A person with a dream and constantly working hard for it would always succeed. When Lin Yuan had seen the crane shadow sensor that Hu Quan had carved, he had been attracted by Hu Quan's spirit craftsman skills. He had not expected that Hu Quan's spirit craftsman skills were already not at the Class 4 spirit craftsman standard. However, because Hu Quan had not comprehended the second willpower rune, there was no second fantasy breed fae and he was stuck at the strength of a spirit chi professional. Therefore, Hu Quan was stuck as a Class 4 spirit craftsman and had been unable to become a Class 5 spirit craftsman. Hu Quan pondered for a moment and took out the contract he had signed with Lin Yuan from his diamond fae storage box and handed it to him. He handed it to Lin Yuan and said, "Lin Yuan, I want to annul this contract." Lin Yuan's expression froze, but he immediately smiled and said, "Sure, Uncle Hu. Sure, Uncle Hu. No problem." A Class 5 spirit craftsman was already considered a big shot in the Radiance Federation. Although a spirit craftsman was not as noble as a creation master, any Class 5 lifestyle class spirit chi professional was enough to be called a foundation-level resource. Therefore, Lin Yuan could understand that Hu Quan wanted to annul the contract. At that time, the contract that Lin Yuan and Hu Quan had signed was relatively loose on the issue of staying or leaving, so it could be annulled easily. However, at that moment, Lin Yuan heard Hu Quan's words change. "I also want to stay in this mansion and become a part of it like when you and Liu Jie." Lin Yuan was a little stunned when he heard Hu Quan's words. Hu Quan didn't know about his creation master abilities or Black's identity. Therefore, in Lin Yuan's opinion, Hu Quan's current decision was a little surprising. Since Uncle Hu, a Class 5 spirit craftsman, has spoken, I'm naturally very happy to accept. It's also an honor for this mansion to be a part of it. May I know your conditions? When Hu Quan heard Lin Yuan ask about his conditions, he immediately laughed and replied, "The conditions are still the same as before. The conditions are still the same as before. I just want to have completely jade-textured wood for me to use." Hu Quan added, "The conditions are still the same as before. Just like so much completely jade-textured wood in this month." Hu Quan could now be considered half a Class 5 creation master. As long as he obtained the Radiance Federation's official recognition, his status and prestige would be greatly enhanced. If Hu Quan was willing, he could become an honored guest of the various major powers. But in Hu Quan's opinion, it was useless. Could fame and prestige be used as countless pieces of completely jade-textured wood? It could be said that in this 1 month, Hu Quan had experienced the true happiness of the world. Not to mention the fact that the jade-textured wood was so cool to use. Just by looking at the environment of the manor's main residence, Hu Quan felt that it was not an exaggeration to describe it as a fairyland. Therefore, after knowing that he could become a Class 5 spirit craftsman, he immediately made a decision after hesitating for a while. Hu Quan decided to tie himself up as soon as possible. If other Class 4 spirit craftsmen found out that Lin Yuan had so many completely jade-textured wood to use and came over to negotiate, wouldn't he lose the initiative? Due to Hu Quan's impatience, he became a part of this manor and was also a Class 4 spirit craftsman who was about to become a Class 5 spirit craftsman. This time, he did not sign a written contract with Hu Quan. There was also no need to go to the Radiance Federation to apply for certification. This time, Hu Quan used his newly comprehended willpower rune to swear an oath and accept the supervision of the will of heaven and earth. Just like that, when both Hu Quan and Lin Yuan felt that they had taken advantage of the situation, another member was added to the mansion. Hu Quan was now considered one of Lin Yuan's people. Lin Yuan pointed at the wall at the side and said, "That's right. Uncle Hu, you can add yourself to the wall as well." Hearing this, Hu Quan chuckled and said, "I've prepared all the materials. I'm just waiting for your approval before I can put myself on it." After chatting for a while, Lin Yuan asked when he didn't see Liu Jie. Where is Brother Liu?" Wen Yu said. Brother Liu said he went out to buy groceries. He should be back soon. For some reason, when he looked at her, he suddenly felt that she seemed to have changed a lot in the past 1.5 months. He became much steadier. After speaking to them, Lin Yuan returned to his room and washed up. After washing up, he put on the spirit chi clothes that Wen Yu had prepared. He looked at the time and called Liu Jie. The phone rang less than 3 times before Liu Jie picked it up. "Big brother Liu, I'm back at the mansion. When are you coming back?" Upon hearing that, Liu Jie immediately replied, "I'll be home in half an hour." When he hung up the phone, Lin Yuan could clearly hear the joy in Liu Jie's tone after hearing that he had returned to the mansion. On the other end of the line, Liu Jie suddenly felt himself patting his arm. He looked back and found that it was Bai Hao. At that moment, Bai Hao said, "Liu Jie, what happened to make you so happy? The corners of your mouth almost reached your temples when you picked up the phone." When he picked up the phone, the corners of his mouth almost reached his temples. Liu Jie had long been familiar with Bai Hao's way of speaking. Liu Jie was already used to Bai Hao's way of speaking. Bai Hao's words were as sharp as needles. Bai Hao's heart was more fragile than glass, but when the layer of glass on the surface faded, Bai Hao's heart was softer than anyone else's. This was also why Liu Jie could always be friends with Bai Hao. Liu Jie had long been used to Bai Hao's sharp tongue. "Tell me, what's the matter? Hurry up and jump. I'm anxious to get home." Liu Jie felt somewhat helpless. He had come out to buy some spiritual ingredients. As a result, he bumped into Bai Hao, who had just finished a match in the S tournament. When he saw Liu Jie, he asked him to accompany him to buy clothes. During this period of time, Bai Hao had been depressed because his favorite streamer, Sparrow Voice Lowly Goddess, had not appeared. In order to take care of Bai Hao's mood, Liu Jie agreed to accompany him. As a result, when he arrived at the clothing store, Bai Hao was as happy as ever. Liu Jie seriously suspected that Bai Hao missed the Sparrow Voice Lowly Goddess so much because he liked the feeling of rewarding in the live stream. Bai Hao asked, holding a pile of spiritual energy clothes, "Which one do you think looks better on me? I like so many of them. I can't possibly buy all of them." Looking at the pile of clothes, Liu Jie felt a headache coming on. How long would it take for Bai Hao to try them on one by one? Liu Jie said, "Every time you buy a piece of clothing, you will have to give one less gift to the Sparrow Voice Lowly Goddess's livestream. Every 10 pieces of clothing you buy will bring you closer to the second place. Every 100 pieces of clothing you buy, you will have to sit at the back of the Sparrow Voice Lowly Goddess's fan meet and concert." Chapter 14 End of this chapter. Chapter 321. As soon as Bai Hao heard that, he put down his clothes, grabbed Liu Jie's hand, and pulled him out of the room. Liu Jie sighed. It seemed like Bai Hao was serious about this. Bai Hao really liked the Sparrow Voice Lowly Goddess and did not like the feeling of rewarding in the Sparrow Voice Lowly Goddess livestreaming room. However, it was also because of this that it was more difficult. Bai Hao did not know who the Sparrow Voice Lowly Goddess was and only knew her singing. Bai Hao was not in the mood to shop and went straight back to his guild club. Liu Jie also returned to the mansion with the fresh spiritual ingredients he had just bought. Liu Jie had been training for more than a month and had inscribed the Hurricane Owlet Moth template with the Insect Queen's Platinum ability. This made Liu Jie confident that he could rank in the top 30 in the Radiance 100 sequence. It was even possible to say that if Liu Jie burst out with all his strength, he might enter the top 20. However, Liu Jie did not dare to guarantee all this. Although Liu Jie had become stronger in the past 3 years, how could the other Radiance 100 sequence members not become stronger? Therefore, Liu Jie did not intend to expose all his strength in this sequence ranking. It would be fine as long as he could fight for the top 30 in the Radiance 100 sequence. The change in strength during this training made Liu Jie a little more confident after knowing Black's identity. Upon entering the mansion, Liu Jie saw Lin Yuan eating fruits and drinking tea with Wen Yu and Hu Quan. Liu Jie hurriedly went up to greet them and then took the fresh spiritual ingredients to cook. After all, it was already quite late. The sun was setting in the west, and even the sunset glow had disappeared. It was replaced by faint stars that dotted the sky. Lin Yuan and Wen Yu hurriedly went to the kitchen to help, but they were driven out by Liu Jie. Not only did Liu Jie not let Lin Yuan enter the kitchen, but he also did not let Wen Yu in. Although Liu Jie was not a chef, he was more willing to turn his joy into food to share with his companions. This was the romance of Liu Jie, a man who was not very good with words. Lin Yuan hurriedly shouted into the kitchen. "Big brother Liu, cook a little more. 2 more people will come for dinner tonight." As soon as Liu Jie heard that, he came out of the kitchen and looked at Lin Yuan seriously. "How much do they eat?" Lin Yuan did not know how much Endless Summer ate, but he thought of how the mother of Bloodbath ate. "Big, very big." Liu Jie asked in disbelief when he heard that. "Does she have a bigger appetite than Wen Yu?" When Wen Yu heard Liu Jie's words, she felt as if she had been struck by a bolt from the blue. Liu Jie was really hopeless. Lin Yuan was still more normal. At that moment, Liu Jie heard Lin Yuan's voice. "Even if Wen Yu can eat 4 bowls of rice in 1 meal, she can't eat half of the amount of food that one of the people who came for dinner tonight can eat." Liu Jie calculated his appetite and went back to the kitchen to cook. When Wen Yu heard his words, she felt that the lightning that had struck her head had turned and struck back into the sky. Then, a thunderstorm descended from the sky. What did it mean to be able to eat 4 bowls of rice in 1 meal? Wen Yu could not help but sigh in her heart. It was fine that Liu Jie was a straight man, but even his young master, Lin Yuan, was a straight man. However, a question popped up in Wen Yu's mind. When did I eat 4 bowls of rice? At most, he had only eaten 3.5 bowls. Liu Jie went into the kitchen to cook. In a short while, the mother of Bloodbath and Endless Summer returned to the mansion. This time, the mother of Bloodbath did not immediately transform into its spider form and lie on the roof beam. On one hand, it was because Endless Summer had also come to the mansion. On the other hand, although everyone in the mansion was already familiar with the mother of Bloodbath, the people in the mansion did not know the mother of Bloodbath. Except for when the mother of Bloodbath had transformed into its human form and sent Lin Yuan back when he had fainted, it had appeared once. Normally, the mother of Bloodbath had no sense of presence in the mansion. After such a long time, they should get to know each other. When the mother of Bloodbath and Endless Summer came in, Wen Yu and Hu Quan immediately went forward to greet them. Even Liu Jie, who was cooking in the kitchen, poked his head out and greeted them. However, Lin Yuan could clearly feel a sense of restraint from Endless Summer and the mother of Bloodbath. It was like a guest who had just come to someone else's house and was a little reserved when meeting the host. This was really not the style of suzerain myth breed experts like the mother of Bloodbath and Endless Summer. Lin Yuan knew that whether it was the mother of Bloodbath or Endless Summer, they could already transform into human form. However, it had not been long since they could transform into human form. Whether it was the mother of Bloodbath or Endless Summer, they could actually transform into human form within the past 2 months. Therefore, the mother of Bloodbath and Endless Summer were not familiar with getting along with humans. The mother of Bloodbath and Endless Summer were not like other fays that had been contracted by humans when they were young. The mother of Bloodbath and Endless Summer had comprehended willpower runes and become myth-breed fays on their own in a wild state. The mother of Bloodbath and Endless Summer really did not have much experience in interacting with humans. Normally, the most direct way to solve some difficult problems was to speak with strength. However, everyone in this mansion was someone that the mother of Bloodbath and Endless Summer needed to get along with in the future. Liu Jie cooked very quickly. In less than an hour, the table made of completely jade-textured wood was filled with delicacies. According to Lin Yuan's instructions in advance, Liu Jie specially fried 3 large plates of chicken wings. The table was filled with sour, sweet, salty, fragrant, spicy, and everything except bitterness. This sumptuous meal seemed to have a magical power. During the meal, the mother of Bloodbath and Endless Summer became familiar with Liu Jie, Wen Yu, and Hu Quan. Just as Lin Yuan thought that after eating, the mother of Bloodbath would once again turn into a spider and lie on the roof beam. At that moment, Wen Yu had already started to help the mother of Bloodbath and Endless Summer clean up the empty room. Upon seeing this, Lin Yuan could not help but feel that he had been too negligent. He had always thought that when the mother of Bloodbath returned to the mansion, it would lie on the roof beam outside. This was its unique lifestyle. However, he did not know that it was just because the mother of Bloodbath was not familiar with everyone, so it lived a lonely life. However, it was not too late to find out now. The addition of the mother of Bloodbath and Endless Summer immediately made this mansion lively. When playing the Fey Battle Flag game at night, each party would be on one side, and the 6 parties would attack each other, causing chaos. After playing a few rounds, Lin Yuan found that no matter how they played, Wen Yu could win. Furthermore, she could consume the resources of the 5 parties with the least amount of resources and become the final winner. Chapter 15 End of this chapter. Chapter 322. When playing the Battle Flag game previously, Lin Yuan had felt that she was powerful, but she was not as monstrous as she was now. However, this also allowed him to see her ability in allocating resources from the side. Simply put, this ability was a kind of gambling ability. This gambling ability could be used in business or even a private faction's planning and operation. Lin Yuan planned to establish his own private faction. He had Endless Summer in terms of force, but he had never had a suitable helper in terms of strategy. If Wen Yu had the ability to deploy resources and plan an operation, she could completely help Lin Yuan solve a lot of problems. Lin Yuan was extremely concerned about building his own private faction. Moreover, Lin Yuan's character and way of doing things also determined that he would never be a hands-off shopkeeper in building his own private faction. Lin Yuan planned to find time to talk to Wen Yu about some ideas for building his private faction. After playing the Battle Flag game, everyone returned to their respective rooms. At that moment, Lin Yuan realized that Hu Quan did not return to his room to rest. Instead, he began to carefully carve the fine, completely jade-textured wood fragments of various colors in the living room. Lin Yuan could not help but remind him. "Uncle Hu, it's too late. Do it tomorrow. Your health is more important." Carving completely jade-textured wood would not make any noise. Lin Yuan was completely afraid that Hu Quan's body would not be able to take it if he stayed up all night. Even when Lin Yuan had been enhancing Fei's day and night, he had to ensure that he had 5 hours of rest every day. The body was the capital of everything. If the body collapsed, there would be nothing left. Hu Quan replied with a smile. "I'll process the fragments needed for the mother of Bloodbath and Endless Summer to make the wall scenery first so that they can be arranged for the wall scenery tomorrow." When Hu Quan said this, his eyes revealed a kind of warmth and deep meaning. The warmth was because Hu Quan had been alone with the spirit craftsman profession for so many years and had long been used to loneliness and solitude. But now that he had these companions, even though Hu Quan was already middle-aged, he still experienced a kind of peace at the dining table with his companions just now. Time was clear, people loved to play and laugh. No one was an isolated island. As for the deep meaning, Hu Quan had already seen that both the mother of Bloodbath and Endless Summer were suzerain myth-breed Fays. Both the mother of Bloodbath and Endless Summer had changed their hair colors. However, Hu Quan was a king-class expert. Even if his aptitude wasn't considered high and he only had one fantasy breed Fey, Hu Quan was a king-class expert. However, he still had the necessary vision. Hu Quan felt that he could not see through Lin Yuan, but all this was not important to him. Hu Quan felt that since he had joined this mansion, it was equivalent to being on Lin Yuan's side. The moment everyone was on the same side, they had to share blessings and sorrows. Hu Quan had the awareness of being a follower. Hu Quan might not be able to help in other areas, but as long as it was something a Class 5 spirit craftsman could do. Then Hu Quan would act as if no one was willing to let him do it. He returned to his room and released Genius from the spirit lock spatial zone. Lin Yuan had wanted to release Genius during the meal and let it eat with everyone. However, Genius wanted to accompany Chimey in the spirit lock spatial zone. Chimey usually gave Genius a headache, and Genius had to help Chimey solve many of its problems. However, it was undeniable that Chimey was the most important family member to Genius apart from Lin Yuan. Genius knew that Chimey was evolving, improving its quality, and becoming stronger. However, Genius was not anxious about itself at all. Genius felt that it was not an ambitious spirit beast. Genius knew that even when it was ugly, Lin Yuan had treated it as a treasure. No matter how weak it was, Lin Yuan would not despise it. In Genius' opinion, it was already a cat's happiness to be able to follow Lin Yuan and Chimey. Genius usually had the habit of licking its fur, but Lin Yuan still gave Genius a bath and helped it blow dry its fine white fur. This habit was formed when Lin Yuan had brought Genius home when it was still 100 questions beast that could not even be considered a fae. After a few years, the habit had become natural. Genius no longer needed to bathe. However, as long as the conditions were met, Lin Yuan would still give Genius a bath once a month. After Lin Yuan returned to his room, he was not in a hurry to sleep. Instead, he was preparing to fight a celestial stairway duel on Star Web. After all, ever since Lin Yuan had ascended the celestial stairway, he had not fought a single celestial stairway duel. At present, Lin Yuan's celestial stairway stars were only 0 stars. Even if Lin Yuan had the celestial stairway's exclusive title and could extend the time limit for celestial stairway duels. However, Lin Yuan felt that there was no need to use this privilege. Lin Yuan originally wanted to go through the celestial stairway duel as usual. However, at that moment, Lin Yuan suddenly thought of Tian Ningning. Lin Yuan simply left a message to Tian Ningning on Star Web and said that he was going to fight a celestial stairway duel. Lin Yuan originally thought that Tian Ningning would not be on Star Web at this time, but he did not expect her to reply instantly. After notifying Tian Ningning, Lin Yuan went to the celestial stairway duel as usual. Logically speaking, if others had Lin Yuan's popularity and prestige, they would have already started live streaming on Star Web. This way, they could increase attention and exposure to gain the recognition of their fans. However, even if Lin Yuan ascended the celestial stairway, he was still the same and terrifyingly low profile. Tian Ningning was not disappointed with Lin Yuan's choice. Instead, she admired him a little. Tian Ningning knew that this silver-masked youth would always choose to walk a very righteous path at all times. Along the way, he did not ask for anything and did not procrastinate. The achievements that others saw might only be 1/10 of what this youth had inadvertently revealed. Lin Yuan thought that he would be matched with a difficult opponent this time. In the end, Lin Yuan was matched with only 2 gold 4 elite fays. Lin Yuan checked his opponent's information and found that his opponent was also 0 star on the celestial stairway. He felt that since the opponent had no intention of fighting, he might as well let Chimey use the radiant body to kill the 2 gold 4 elite deer species fays. There were no waves in this duel. Lin Yuan used Black Tiger Arfu's tornado to destroy the parking lot. He won his first celestial stairway duel. At that moment, Lin Yuan checked his identity card. Name, Black Gender, Male Height, 178 cm Weight, 61 kg Star Tower Floor, Celestial Stairway 1 Star Spirit Chi Occupation, Healing Type Professional Occupation Rank, C Exclusive Achievement, Straight to Celestial Stairway, ascended the Celestial Stairway from the Star Tower without losing a single match. Contracted Fae, Morbius, Bronze X Legend, 1000 Questions Beast, Bronze X Legend, Twilight Starbird, Silver Eye Fantasy Eye, Red Thorn, Silver Eye Fantasy Eye, Acid Corrosion Queen Bee, Gold Eye Legend, Source Sand, Gold Eye Fantasy Eye, Dual Record Sad Smiley Star Tower, 100 duels, 100 wins, 0 losses. 100 Highest Floor. Celestial Stairway Promotion Duel, 2 duels, 2 wins, 0 losses. Celestial Stairway, 1 win, 0 losses, 0 consecutive wins. 1 highest number of stars. Lin Yuan found that his celestial stairway stars and dual record had changed, and there was an additional exclusive achievement. Chapter 16 – End of this chapter. Chapter 323. The opponent that Lin Yuan had just been matched with had been tossing and turning between the celestial stairway and the promotion duel. Lin Yuan had personally sent him down the celestial stairway. After seeing Lin Yuan's duel in the celestial stairway video library, Tian Ningning realized that she actually did not know how to write about this duel record. For an exclusive reporter, the real difficulty was not to write about an exciting and evenly matched duel. The real difficulty was this kind of duel that ended in a few seconds. Tian Ningning wrote the duel record in the most authentic style. Therefore, for this duel record that she did not know how to write, Tian Ningning intended to be like this duel that ended in 2 seconds. She would just write 2 words, instant kill, and that would be it. After Lin Yuan finished the celestial stairway duel, he could not help but feel a little puzzled. Was it because he was unlucky during the promotion duel and had encountered strong opponents like Chen Hongfeng and Poison Beauty? Or was it because he was too lucky after reaching the celestial stairway and had encountered duelists with strength that should not have appeared on the celestial stairway? Lin Yuan had just gone through the trial and did not intend to hone his combat skills on Star Web again. Although Red Thorn had just become a silver fantasy breed, there was obviously no effect on a place like Star Web to increase his combat compatibility with Red Thorn. This was because Star Web and duels were not enough for Red Thorn to show the strength of the Sea of Flowers after reaching Silver I Fantasy I. Therefore, Lin Yuan did not continue with the next Star Web duel. Instead, he withdrew his identity as Black, a combat class Spirit Chi professional. Then, he logged on to Star Web as a creation master. Black Star Web usually only received Tian Ningning's Star Web messages. However, Lin Yuan's Star Web messages as a creation master were always in a full state. Lin Yuan could not read such a huge amount of messages no matter how hard he tried. Lin Yuan simply stopped looking at the messages from strangers. Anyway, these people came to find him for a small matter. They either wanted to buy a large number of elite spirit siphon goldfish and silver usnias. They also asked if he had extra flower brocade pearls to exchange. Of course, most of these messages were asking if Lin Yuan had any bronze epic phase to trade. After all, nothing could attract the attention of a Spirit Chi professional who had comprehended a willpower rune more than a bronze epic fey. Even if there was, it would probably only be a bronze legend fey. If someone announced that they wanted to buy a bronze legend fey, everyone would probably think that the person was a fool. Either that, or he drank alcohol and took cephalosporin. However, at that moment, he suddenly realized that someone had actually sent him a message in his friend list in the past few days. Lin Yuan's creation master status was the same as Black's, which was a Spirit Chi professional. There weren't many friends. Other than the braised egghead, who would occasionally come and talk to him, and Ju Jusin, who would occasionally talk to him about the store's dividends, Ju Jusin was the only exception. Very few people would add Lin Yuan as a friend. However, Lin Yuan found that Listen, who occupied one of his friend slots, had sent him 3 messages a few days ago. Lin Yuan clicked on it and raised his brows before frowning slightly. Listen, expert. I wonder if you can enhance contracted bronze flawless phase and upgrade them from flawless to epic? Listen, Guru, if it's possible, I would like to ask for a chance. You can name a price as long as I can afford it. Listen, Guru, it's urgent. Please help me. Lin Yuan could feel the anxiety in Listen's message. According to Listen's message, Lin Yuan felt that rather than saying that Listen had sent these 3 messages to ask for a trade, it would be better to say that Listen had sent these 3 messages with the intention of asking for help. Obviously, Listen should have encountered some problems. Lin Yuan had previously made a deal with Listen. Lin Yuan's impression of Listen was limited to knowing that he had a high EQ and was extremely good at dealing with interpersonal relationships. Even if he reached a new group, he could quickly integrate into the group through his high EQ and become the center of attention. Just like in Lin Yuan's previous deal with Listen. Listen found that the bronze epic fey, the Pain Illusory Fox, that Lin Yuan had provided had comprehended an excellent exclusive skill, Spirit Loophole. Listen sent an additional cubic meter of day and night spirit silver as a thank you gift. It could be seen how much Listen cared about making friends with Lin Yuan. Now, Listen had used the word beg in the 3 messages. This word was equivalent to Listen exhausting the friendly relationship that he had just established with Lin Yuan. Obviously, Listen should be at his wit's end. If he wanted to buy a bronze epic Fey on the market, it was still possible to participate in more auctions. If he could happen to buy a suitable bronze epic Fey through bartering or auctions, it would be equivalent to hitting the jackpot. However, if he wanted to find a creation master to help him upgrade his phase quality from bronze to epic, he would need to find a creation master to help him upgrade his phase quality to epic. That was completely different from directly buying a bronze epic Fey. Looking for a creation master to help him improve his contracted phase quality, at the very least, he had to be able to invite a creation master. Moreover, to be able to improve a bronze flawless Fey to epic, it meant that the creation master had to be at least class 4. In fact, he had to be at least an intermediate class 4 creation master to be confident that he could definitely improve a bronze flawless Fey to epic. In this world, if there were any resources that were the most scarce, it would definitely be the resources of creation masters. Otherwise, the status of creation masters would not be so respected in this world. There were not many class 4 creation masters in the entire Radiance Federation. There were less than 20 pinnacle class 4 creation masters. There were only 3 class 5 creation masters. Every class 4 and above creation master's energy was unparalleled and shocking. If a class 4 creation master wanted to take on the task of nurturing a Fey, countless factions would probably rush to contribute resources just to get a chance to improve the Fey's quality and grade. Therefore, it was not easy to invite a class 4 creation master to improve a Fey's quality from flawless to epic. Moreover, Listen did not set the upper limit of the price he could pay in this transaction. This meant that Listen did not hesitate to use all his resources to exchange for such a chance to improve the Fey's quality. Lin Yuan had a rather good impression of Listen. If Listen could pay a sufficient price for this transaction, he would be willing to accept it. Lin Yuan did not mind helping Listen. Chapter 17 End of this chapter. Chapter 324. This was because it might be difficult for intermediate class 4 creation masters to upgrade a bronze Fey from flawless to epic. However, it was a piece of cake for Lin Yuan, and he could do it easily. Lin Yuan might as well just return from below. Deep Mountain Elder Lin, 3 source type items can be considered. Since Listen's message had been sent a few days ago, Lin Yuan did not expect Listen to reply to his message now. Ever since Lin Yuan had received the circular item that the Mother of Bloodbath had thrown to him, he had the idea of collecting more source-type items to store. The source-type items that the Mother of Bloodbath found strange and useless were exactly what he needed the most. The value of source-type items varied from person to person. There were no useless source-type items, only people who were suitable for them. Therefore, source-type items would always be a very precious and irreplaceable resource. In short, there was no harm in collecting more source-type items. After logging off Star Web, Lin Yuan found that Genius was already lying on its back on the bed, sleeping soundly. Lin Yuan quietly went over, pulled the quilt, and covered Genius with it. Lin Yuan felt that he still did not feel sleepy. He took out the weed-like dragon's mouth orchid from his diamond Fey storage box, which he had picked in the depths of the endless deep forest. He was going to nurture it. He took out the normal dragon's mouth orchid that he had picked in the depths of the endless forest. Lin Yuan looked at it for a moment and found that he really could not see that it was an orchid Fey without using Morbius True Data. This was because most orchid Feys were no different from weeds when they did not bloom at normal. This dragon's mouth orchid was not much different from the white jade snow orchid that Lin Yuan had obtained previously. It was a normal Fey that could not bloom. If one really wanted to distinguish carefully, this dragon's mouth orchid's slender leaves had a few faint gradual patterns compared to the white jade snow orchid. The leaves were also more slender. Although orchid Feys were not special when they did not bloom, as long as they bloomed, they would live up to the reputation of being a gentleman among flowers. Among the plum blossoms, orchid, bamboo, and chrysanthemum, orchid Feys were considered a relatively precious type of Fey. The white jade snow orchid that Lin Yuan had nurtured previously was not considered a superior orchid. However, The dragon's mouth orchid that Lin Yuan was holding in his hand was a rather famous species among the superior orchids. He took the normal dragon's mouth orchid into the spirit lock spatial zone. He began to circulate his spiritual power to strengthen the dragon's mouth orchid. The normal dragon's mouth orchid had been constantly increasing its quality and grade in Lin Yuan's hands. When this dragon's mouth orchid broke through to the bronze rank, within those thin and long orchid leaves that carried a gradual change in color, a thick and sturdy flower bud directly sprang out, the bud producing a large dark blue flower bud. While Lin Yuan was constantly injecting spiritual power into the dragon's mouth orchid, the huge flower bud was also constantly unfolding. When the dragon's mouth orchid was upgraded to bronze X epic, the flower buds of the dragon's mouth orchid had already bloomed. The dark blue and bewitching dragon's mouth orchid was the size of a palm. Each dragon's mouth orchid only had one bud, and each bud only had one flower. The dragon's mouth orchid had a very unique orchid shape, just like the tongue of a dragon species fey. In the middle of the dragon's mouth orchid's flower core, there were fine, scale-like woody tissues. Under the illumination of light, these woody tissues would faintly reflect light. It was as though there was a layer of dragon species fey scales on the surface. Although these scales would reflect light, they felt like velvet and were very magical. When the dragon's mouth orchid bloomed, Lin Yuan smelled a very rich fragrance that made people feel intoxicated when they smelled it. The smell of the dragon's mouth orchid wasn't actually bad, as it was simply too rich. It was so rich that it made people feel a little greasy. However, the value of the dragon's mouth orchid's flower didn't lie in whether the flower's fragrance was good or not. It was because the dragon's mouth orchid's flower could allow fays with dragon species bloodlines to stimulate their hidden bloodline. This was the reason why the dragon's mouth orchid was considered a high-grade orchid among the orchid fays. Lin Yuan didn't have the slightest hesitation and immediately broke off the dragon's mouth orchid's blooming dark blue flower from the stem. If the dragon's mouth orchid wanted to ensure that the dragon's mouth orchid would be able to awaken the phase dragon species bloodline to the greatest extent, it had to be plucked when the dragon's mouth orchid was in full bloom. Otherwise, if it was a little late, the dragon's mouth orchid's dark blue flower would wilt and lose a portion of its effects. The dragon's mouth orchid's flowering period was very short. After blooming, the dragon's mouth orchid could only bloom for less than an hour. Therefore, when creation masters nurtured the dragon's mouth orchid, they had to be very careful. Otherwise, by the time they returned from doing something else, the dragon's mouth orchid that they had painstakingly nurtured would have withered. Lin Yuan might pluck the massive dark blue dragon's mouth orchid from the dragon's mouth orchid. However, Lin Yuan didn't intend to use this dragon's mouth orchid to awaken Blackie's dragon species bloodline. This was because the higher the quality of a fey like the dragon's mouth orchid, the better the dragon's mouth orchid's effect on awakening the dragon species bloodline. This dragon's mouth orchid was condensed under the dragon's mouth orchid's epic quality, not legendary quality. Therefore, this dragon's mouth orchid's dark blue dragon's mouth orchid's epic quality could not awaken Blackie's dragon species bloodline to the greatest extent. Lin Yuan planned to keep this dragon's mouth orchid's epic dark blue dragon's mouth orchid as a resource to exchange for other resources. Most of the dragon's mouth orchids that could appear in the market were light blue, which was the dragon's mouth orchid's flawless quality. Almost no one had heard of a dark blue dragon's mouth orchid's epic dragon's mouth orchid appearing in the market. The dragon's mouth orchid's quality determined the ability of the dragon's mouth orchid's dragon species bloodline. The dragon's mouth orchid's grade determined the time it needed to bloom a dragon's mouth orchid. The dragon's mouth orchid was a fey that had extremely high requirements for spirit chi concentration. In the spirit lock spatial zone, a large amount of pure spirit chi could allow the dragon's mouth orchid to bloom another dragon's mouth orchid relatively quickly. Chapter 18 End of this chapter. Chapter 325. If a normal creation master nurtured the dragon's mouth orchid in the outside world, it would depend on the creation master's ability. If a Class 3 creation master wanted to nurture a bronze dragon's mouth orchid to bloom once, it would take about a year. If a Class 4 creation master nurtured the dragon's mouth orchid, it would take 9 months to produce a single dragon's mouth orchid. However, when Lin Yuan sensed the dragon's mouth orchid state in the spirit lock spatial zone, he found that it would take 4 months for it to bloom again even in the spirit lock spatial zone. However, Lin Yuan did not care about this. This was because he had decided to upgrade this Bronze X Epic Dragon's Mouth Orchid to Legend. After the Dragon's Mouth Orchid was upgraded to Legend, it would immediately produce a Dragon's Mouth Orchid and would not need to wait for the flowering period. Since Lin Yuan wanted to use the Dragon's Mouth Orchid to stimulate Blackie's dragon species bloodline, he would use the best one. Therefore, Lin Yuan planned to find time to nurture this Dragon's Mouth Orchid and upgrade it from Epic to Legend. If the Legend Dragon's Mouth Orchid produced a Dragon's Mouth Orchid, to what extent would it stimulate Blackie's dragon species bloodline? Lin Yuan was still looking forward to it. If he could stimulate the dragon species bloodline in Blackie's body before it became a fantasy breed, Blackie would be able to do so. Then, when Blackie became a fantasy breed, it would have more chances to undergo a racial transition due to the bloodline purification. It would allow the dragon species bloodline in its body to slowly devour the fish species bloodline and undergo a racial transition toward a dragon species Fae. Lin Yuan really hoped that Blackie could quickly upgrade its grade. This was because if Blackie could advance to a fantasy breed and quickly increase its grade, the Spirit Gather goldfish would be extremely valuable. Then, according to the effect of Blackie's exclusive skill, Spirit Chi Imprint, it could increase the speed at which Lin Yuan's Spirit Chi Imprint accumulated Spirit Chi. It was unknown how many times Blackie's exclusive skill, Spirit Chi Imprint, had helped Lin Yuan a lot. It was simply considered a great trump card for Lin Yuan. The Spirit Gather goldfish, Blackie, was only at Bronze X Legend, and the spiritual power that it could release at any moment was not considered a lot. If the Spirit Gather goldfish could become a silver fantasy breed, the Spirit Chi that the Spirit Gather goldfish could store would be 10 times more than it was now. However, Lin Yuan was rather melancholic as he did not know when he would be able to comprehend a suitable willpower rune for Blackie. However, he did not intend to enhance the Dragon's Mouth Orchid to the Legend quality now. Given his current ability, it would still take him 5 days to upgrade a Bronze Epic Fae to Legend. It had been too long, and he had other things to do recently. Therefore, he could only delay this matter for now. At that moment, Lin Yuan suddenly recalled the greyish avian Fae that he had found in the Endless Forest. It was nearly 50 centimeters tall and had a wingspan of nearly 1 meter. With Morbius True Data, Lin Yuan had already confirmed that this grey avian Fae was a crane species Fae. However, due to the crane species Fae's genetic model not being able to develop without sufficient spirit chi concentration, all of its characteristics were hidden. Based on true data, Lin Yuan was unable to identify the species of this crane species Fae. Therefore, Lin Yuan summoned this crane species Fae from his diamond Fae storage box. This crane species Fae had been sick and listless in the diamond Fae storage box. When it was suddenly summoned, Lin Yuan could clearly feel that this crane species Fae was panicking and fearful, appearing very weak and helpless. Lin Yuan saw this little fellow trying its best to shrink its body, trying its best to reduce its presence. Lin Yuan paused what he was about to do. This little fellow was clearly nervous and afraid, but it was so weak that it could not even make more movements. Lin Yuan had also felt this deep sense of powerlessness when he had first brought Chu Ci to survive 10 years ago. However, after gritting his teeth and enduring it, Lin Yuan understood that there was no weight in this world that his shoulders could not carry. Lin Yuan circulated the spiritual power in his body and injected a large amount of pure spiritual power into this grey little fellow's body through his hands. After a long while, the dusty little guy slowly moved. Once he injected spiritual power, Lin Yuan knew how terrible the situation inside this crane species Fae was. At the same time, he was secretly shocked. What kind of crane species Fae is this? It actually requires such a large amount of pure spiritual power to slowly develop the genetic model in its body. Based on this crane species Fae's current situation, it simply could not survive in nature. When this grey little fellow sensed Lin Yuan's injection of spirit chi, it weakly opened its half-squinted eyes. Lin Yuan saw that this grey little fellow's eyes were like the purest black gemstones. It might be a little dim, but it had an elegant and intelligent look. Lin Yuan reached out to tidy up the crane Fae's dusty feathers and found that there was a lot of dust and some leaf fragments between its feathers. Lin Yuan brought this crane out of the spirit lock spatial zone, just like how he had bathed Genius. Carefully and carefully, he helped the dusty little guy take a bath. Then, Lin Yuan wiped the grey feathers on this little fellow's body. After Lin Yuan's cleaning, this crane fey might still be grey, but it was much more spirited. Lin Yuan brought this grey little fellow back into the spirit lock spatial zone. He injected a large amount of pure spiritual power into this normal crane species fey. 1 hour later, Lin Yuan stopped what he was doing. This crane fey's genetic model was seriously lacking, and it couldn't be rushed. It could only be nurtured slowly. Therefore, this grey crane species fey needed to live in the spirit lock spatial zone for a period of time to slowly recover. Lin Yuan planned to nurture this crane fey in the spirit lock spatial zone. However, just as Lin Yuan was preparing to exit the spirit lock spatial zone, he realized that this grey little fellow was actually much more clingy than Genius. Perhaps it had never experienced the warmth of being cared for. At that moment, this grey crane species fey widened its black gemstone-like eyes and looked at Lin Yuan with a pitiful yet affectionate expression. Lin Yuan rubbed the crane species fey's small head. He brought this crane species fey to the cinnabar sweet osmanthus and placed it on the cinnabar sweet osmanthus branches that had green leaves. 4 crane species feys, their bloodline evolution path was completely different from the phoenix bloodline. Chapter 19 End of this chapter. Chapter 327. At that moment, the bald skinny man, Old Fong, was flabbergasted. Old Song, who was as fat as a glutinous rice ball, took out his pen and switched the position of the Abyss Dimensional Rift and the Alien Insect Dimensional Rift on the proposal. The original 8 Class 2 Abyss Dimensional Rifts and 12 Pinnacle Class 1 Alien Insect Dimensional Rifts had been changed to 8 Class 2 Alien Insect Dimensional Rifts and 12 Pinnacle Class 1 Demon Dimensional Rifts. Old Song, this change is too ruthless. From the point of view of the skinny bald man, this exchange was undoubtedly equivalent to increasing the strength of low-level combat power while also increasing a large amount of high-level combat power. The terror of the Class 2 Alien Insect Dimensional Rift was not something that the Class 2 Abyss Dimensional Rift could compare to. The number of dimensional lifeforms was at least 5 times more. Furthermore, the low-grade combat units in the Class 1 Dimensional Rift had been changed to the strongest individual dimensional rift, the Abyss Dimensional Rift. This simple change had increased the difficulty of the test by several folds. At that moment, the bald skinny man, Old Fong, heard Old Song, who was as fat as a glutinous rice ball, speak in a serious tone. If we don't create a huge wave, how will we be able to find the real gold? Just as dawn was about to arrive, this plan, which only had a few words but had been hesitating for an entire night, was sent to the ordinary middle-aged man who was seated on the Imperial Court Council's 13 seats. This ordinary middle-aged man looked at this proposal for a long time. Finally, he stood up and personally made a trip to the Starweb's officials. However, everything was hidden in the morning light, and no one knew about it. The blazing sun rose from the east, and the morning light shone on Lin Yuan's face. It woke Lin Yuan up from his slumber. Lin Yuan stretched his body and washed up. He then brought the half-asleep Genius downstairs. Genius only felt warm in Lin Yuan's hand and soon fell asleep again, snoring softly. Lin Yuan simply placed Genius on the water rhinoceros leather sofa in the living room on the first floor. He allowed Genius to have a good rest on the soft water rhinoceros leather sofa. Genius might have evolved into a 1,000 questions beast, but it had evolved from a housekeeping beast like the 100 questions beast. The 100 questions beast was a feline that loved to sleep. Genius had already broken through the 100 questions beast's racial limit and evolved into a Bronze X Legend 1,000 questions beast. However, he still didn't change his habit of sleeping. However, Lin Yuan realized that at this time last year, Genius could sleep for more than 16 hours. And now, although Genius seemed to be a little lazy every day, it didn't have any problems. But as long as he slept for about 10 hours, he would be fine. At this time, Liu Jie had already placed breakfast on the table. Ever since Lin Yuan, Liu Jie, and when you had moved into the mansion, as long as Liu Jie was in the morning, he would prepare breakfast almost every morning. Today's breakfast was honey pancakes, hot nut porridge, and freshly squeezed banana milk. However, The rich aroma of the food made Lin Yuan, who had just woken up from his sleep and had an empty stomach, hungry. Liu Jie's breakfast this morning was obviously much more than before. Wen Yu, who was helping Liu Jie set the table, rolled her eyes at Liu Jie. He did not need to guess to know that Liu Jie must have asked her how much she could eat for breakfast. Lin Yuan felt that Liu Jie was simply too straight. How could he ask a girl how much she could eat in a meal? If Lin Yuan were to make breakfast, he would definitely ask Wen Yu euphemistically if 4 bowls of rice was enough to save her from embarrassment. Since Hu Quan's arrival, the dining utensils in the mansion had changed. Previously, the utensils were porcelain utensils made of ores or metal utensils made of metal spiritual materials. However, with the addition of Hu Quan, a hidden quasi-class 5 spirit craftsman, the dining utensils in the mansion had become completely jade-textured wood-sculpted utensils. Lin Yuan looked at these completely jade-textured wood utensils and the honey pancakes on the utensils and could not help but sigh. Using these completely jade-textured wood utensils to hold food had a natural and refreshing feeling. It was simply the best choice. Liu Jie had seen the mother of bloodbaths and endless summers appetites yesterday. He no longer felt that when you could eat. In the morning, Liu Jie deliberately got up half an hour earlier and baked a few more pots of honey pancakes. They were obviously prepared for the mother of bloodbath and endless summer. After a while, the mother of bloodbath and endless summer also came out of the room. The mother of bloodbath came out of the room and sniffed as it came to the dining table. Looking at the breakfast on the table, the mother of bloodbath could not help but swallow its saliva. The mother of bloodbath was a foodie and loved to eat all kinds of delicacies. In the mother of bloodbath's opinion, Liu Jie's cooking skills were much more delicious than those of the Spirit Food Pavilion's chefs. Therefore, when the mother of bloodbath saw Liu Jie's breakfast, it felt that it was time to leave the gourmet group. That was because the mother of bloodbath discovered that the delicacies recommended by the members in the gourmet group were clearly not on the same level as Liu Jie's. Liu Jie made a lot of honey pancakes and nut porridge. Therefore, the mother of bloodbath and endless summer could completely let loose and eat to their heart's content. After eating, Lin Yuan thought about his decision to establish a guild club and said to Liu Jie, "Brother Liu, I want to build a club-like guild. Are you interested in joining?" Upon hearing Lin Yuan's question, Liu Jie revealed an honest and heartfelt smile on his face. He quickly nodded and said, "Lin Yuan, if you hadn't asked me, I would have asked you in the next 2 days if you had any plans to establish a guild club." In Liu Jie's opinion, not only was Lin Yuan talented, but he was also very strong. Moreover, Lin Yuan also planned to compete for the Radiance 100 sequence, so there was no reason not to go to the S tournament to gallop and compete. Lin Yuan's combat style was very comprehensive, and it was not easy to define it according to convention. Lin Yuan grasped the responsibilities of healing-type spirit chi professionals, support-type spirit chi professionals, and combat-class spirit chi professionals. It could be said that Lin Yuan's combat style was considered an all-rounder. Therefore, Lin Yuan could join any guild club in his situation. As long as he used his identity as black and expressed his intention to join a guild club. Most guild clubs would probably come to invite Lin Yuan. However, joining a guild club established by others might allow him to participate in the S tournament, but he would also lose the absolute initiative. Liu Jie felt that Lin Yuan's establishment of a guild club was undoubtedly the best choice. I have stories to prepare good wine for you. End of this chapter. Chapter 328. Upon hearing Liu Jie's words, Lin Yuan smiled brightly, revealing his small white teeth. "Brother Liu, then I'll go to the Guild Alliance to apply for the establishment of a club in the next 2 days." Liu Jie said. "Lin Yuan, I'm going to participate in the Radiance 100 sequence ranking in 2 days. At that time, I'll get a spot in the Radiance 100 sequence. At the same time, one Radiance 100 sequence member will be squeezed out. Therefore, during this year's Radiance 100 sequence competition, 11 sequence members will participate in the Radiance 100 sequence test." Lin Yuan nodded in response. This meant that this year's Radiance 100 sequence test was much more competitive than in previous years. The 11 members who had retired from the Radiance 100 sequence would also participate in the Radiance 100 sequence test. If they passed the competition, they would return to the Radiance 100 sequence and would not be withdrawn from the Radiance 100 sequence. This was the Radiance 100 sequences test. Every year, a few members at the bottom of the Radiance 100 would return to the sequence. Therefore, there were less than 10 newcomers who could enter the Radiance 100 sequence during the annual test. In fact, there were only 4 or 5 newcomers in a year who could enter the Radiance 100 sequence. At most, there were only 6 or 7 of them. After all, even the Radiance 100 sequence members from sequence 90 to sequence 100 should not be underestimated in terms of strength. However, Lin Yuan did not care much about this. In the controlled Class 3 Abyss Dimensional Rift, he had witnessed Long Dao, Shishu, Zhao Xiaochun, and Fang Duoduo's strength. Even if Lin Yuan knew that they all had trump cards that they hadn't exposed, he wouldn't be able to defeat them. However, Lin Yuan could vaguely guess the Radiance 100 sequence members' strength. He didn't dare to say that he could rank in the top 90 of the Radiance 100 sequence with his current strength. However, it was not impossible to compete for sequence 90 to sequence 100 of the Radiance 100. Moreover, the Radiance 100 sequence test would take place 2 months later. He could also use Morbius Spirit Chi condensation in the Spirit Lock spatial zone to condense Spirit Chi crystals in the limestone bowl to increase his phase grade. At that moment, Liu Jie spoke again. This time, I plan to compete for one of the Radiance 100 sequence 20 to sequence 30 spots. I also plan to test the current strength of my old friends. If I want to establish a guild club, I can apply to the Guild Alliance after I become a Radiance 100 sequence member. At that time, we can save a lot of steps and not be so troublesome. Lin Yuan's eyes lit up. Although it was not difficult to establish a guild with the nature of a club, it still required specialized personnel to inspect the venue. Moreover, they would also measure the economic level of the organizer of the establishment of a guild club, and whether it could support the daily expenses of a guild club. Only when the conditions are met will you be allowed to establish a club union. Only after the base of the club-type guild was built would there be specialized personnel to conduct a second inspection. Only after the review was successful would the name of the newly established club-like union be recorded by the union. Become a recognized club union. If the Radiance 100 sequence members applied to establish a guild club, these steps could be skipped. Lin Yuan planned to build the guild club in the empty space behind the mansion that he had reserved in advance. Therefore, it would be inconvenient if the Guild Alliance's people came to inspect. Since Liu Jie was going to take the Radiance 100 sequence's internal assessment in these 2 days, he would wait for Liu Jie to finish the assessment before directly applying. Since Liu Jie was going to take the assessment in these 2 days, he obviously did not have enough time to contract the Source-type Cocoon of Evolution and strengthen the Insect Queen's abilities through the Cocoon of Evolution. Lin Yuan did not give the Cocoon of Evolution, which was very suitable for Liu Jie, to Liu Jie first. In Lin Yuan's opinion, it would be better to wait for Liu Jie to return to the Radiance 100 sequence before giving him the Cocoon of Evolution. At that time, this Source-type Cocoon of Evolution would be his gift to celebrate Liu Jie's return to the Radiance 100 sequence. Lin Yuan and Liu Jie chatted for a while, and Liu Jie went to step up his training. At that moment, Hu Quan was collaging his image with the fragments of completely jade-textured wood of different sizes and colors on the wall. Lin Yuan looked at the pattern on the wall and found that the images of the Mother of Bloodbath and Endless Summer had already been completed by Hu Quan at some point last night. Lin Yuan could not help but hold his forehead with his hand. Did Hu Quan not sleep at all last night? Hu Quan used up the completely jade-textured wood fragments in his hand and almost pieced his image on the wall. After putting together his character image, Hu Quan stood up and straightened his joystick. He was obviously very tired. Although Hu Quan was tired, his face was full of pride and excitement as he looked at the wall. It could be seen how satisfied Hu Quan was with his work. When Lin Yuan saw Hu Quan stand up, he poured a cup of hot tea from the teapot on the table and handed it over. "Uncle Hu, have a cup of 3 treasures tea." This 3 treasures tea was sent by Mystic Moon before Lin Yuan went out for training. It was a spirit tea made from 3 kinds of phase through a special technique that could relieve fatigue and restore physical strength. The 3 treasures referred to the plum blossom, Buddha's hand, and pine nuts. The plum blossom color is not bewitching, the the Buddha's hand is fragrant and clean, and the pine nuts are fragrant and full. The three treasures taste comfortable. Every ingredient in this three treasures tea was a platinum spiritual ingredient. Among them, the Buddha's hand was made from the diamond Buddha's hand flowers in the Radiance Moon Mountains Buddha's hand garden. It could be said to be a rare delicacy. Hu Quan took the three treasures tea from Lin Yuan, took a sip, and said, "Lin Yuan, you have so many good things here. Lin Yuan, you really have a lot of good stuff here. Just this tea alone is absolutely extraordinary. When I went to visit the Class 5 spirit craftsman Master Fu Zhen, the tea I drank wasn't as good as this." Apart from being a spirit craftsman and making things, that old man Fu Zhen loves making and tasting tea the most in his life. Lin Yuan could not help but shake his head. For those who did not like tea, they might evaluate the quality of tea leaves based on the value of the tea. However, for those who truly loved tea, everyone had their own favorite type of tea. Lin Yuan also took a sweet white glazed teacup and poured the three treasures tea into it. Then, he used the lid to scratch the mouth of the teacup twice. When Lin Yuan took the teacup, he smelled the fragrance that leaped into his nose before it reached his mouth. Lin Yuan felt that although the three treasures tea's fragrance was warm, it was not his favorite tea type. Add more chapters for your little fairy Tilda. End of this chapter. Chapter 329. Lin Yuan had previously heard that the best way to eat pine nuts was to make tea. When brewing tea, a few pine nuts would be added, and a faint oil would surface from the pine nuts. The oil contained the unique fragrance of pine species phase, rosin. This could make a pot of tea rich in mellow fragrance and smooth in the mouth, allowing one to taste the melodious pine in the mountain forest. However, Lin Yuan did not like the rich taste mixed in the tea. Instead, he liked that kind of light tea. For example, he liked CAICHA's dark dream green tea very much. At that moment, Lin Yuan saw Hu Quan drink the tea in the teacup in one gulp and smacked his lips. "I'll be going out for about half a month in the next few days. I'll use half of my life's savings to see if I can get a bronze epic fey." Hu Quan said this with some faint melancholy. Obviously, after comprehending the willpower rune, Hu Quan was also worried about this bronze epic fey. If Hu Quan did not find a bronze epic fey to contract, he wanted to raise the fey's quality to legend. He did not know how long it would take for it to fuse with the newly comprehended willpower rune and become a fantasy breed. In this case, even if Hu Quan comprehended another willpower rune, he would still be far away from becoming a Class 5 spirit craftsman. When Lin Yuan heard Hu Quan's words, he placed the teacup on the tea table made of completely jade-textured wood. He asked casually, "Uncle Hu, are there any feys you like better?" Upon hearing that, Hu Quan raised his hand and summoned a very light dark green mantis that was nearly half a meter long. Hu Quan raised his hand and summoned a very light, dark green praying mantis that was nearly half a meter long. Upon hearing that, Hu Quan raised his hand and summoned a very light dark green mantis that was nearly half a meter long. The front two scythe-shaped arms did not have barbs like his mantis fey's arms. Instead, they were very smooth. However, the faintly discernible cold glint on them showed how sharp this scythe was. The strangest thing was that this mantis fey's abdomen was round like a small drum. Lin Yuan used true data to check the mantis species fey that Hu Quan had summoned. At a glance, Lin Yuan found that this mantis fey's name was Slaying Jade Saber Mantis. Hu Quan's Jade Saber Mantis was a Platinum 6 Fantasy I fey. Its main function was to swallow metal spirit materials into the stomach, and then turn the metal spirit materials into a special paste for Hu Quan to use. The Jade Saber Mantis could also cut metal into any shape like tofu. At the same time, it could also ensure the smoothness of the metal's surface during the cutting process. This was not only because of how sharp the jade-severing mantis's mantis arms were. A large part of the reason was that the jade-severing saber-kai's exclusive skill allowed it to freely control and change the shape of the metal. It could be said that the fantasy breed jade-severing saber mantis was a fey that was very suitable for spirit craftsmen to create. After summoning the severing jade saber mantis, Hu Quan said with some nostalgia, "I have never thought of fighting anyone in my life, so my contracted feys are all to support my spirit craftsman abilities." After saying that, Hu Quan had a thought. A lustrous purple willpower rune emitting a jade-like luster flew out of Hu Quan's spiritual energy. Lin Yuan raised his brows as he looked at the lustrous purple willpower rune with a jade-like luster. He felt that the texture of this willpower rune was no different from completely jade-textured red sandalwood. At that moment, Hu Quan said proudly, "This willpower rune I comprehended is a treasure. This willpower rune that I comprehended is a treasure. Even if there are other willpower runes that are better than mine, I won't trade it. I comprehended this willpower rune from those completely jade-textured wood. It's undoubtedly a willpower rune that is very suitable for spirit craftsmen to use. You have so many completely jade-textured wood here. With this willpower rune and a wood weaving house centipede for me to contract, I'll definitely be able to use completely jade-textured wood more easily in the future." Hu Quan could not help but feel melancholy. Lin Yuan knew that Hu Quan was worried about obtaining a high-quality bronze wood weaving house centipede. Lin Yuan knew that the wood weaving house centipede was a fey that was very sought after among spirit craftsmen. Many spirit craftsmen who were compatible with insect species feys would also choose to contract the wood weaving house centipede. However, most of the wood weaving house centipedes that were contracted by spirit craftsmen were low-quality ones. Low-quality wood weaving house centipedes were not too rare in the market. For feys like the wood weaving house centipede that were highly sought after by spirit craftsmen, some creation masters were willing to nurture a few of them and sell them on the market to earn money from the spirit craftsmen's pockets. It was for this reason that Hu Quan planned to try his luck with his previous savings. At that moment, Hu Quan heard Lin Yuan speak very calmly and casually. "Uncle Hu, leave this matter to me. However, I don't have a bronze epic wood weaving house centipede." Hu Quan could not help but roll his eyes. Hu Quan thought to himself, if the bronze flawless wood weaving house centipede is useful to me, why would I have to worry so much? At that moment, Hu Quan heard Lin Yuan speak again. "Although I don't have a bronze epic wood weaving house centipede, I do have a bronze legend one." When Hu Quan heard that, his eyes almost popped out of their sockets. His lips began to tremble, and after a long while, he said in disbelief, "What did you just say? A bronze legend wood weaving house centipede?" Lin Yuan nodded and replied with a smile. "Yes, I'll give it to you in 10 days. Even though Hu Quan had gotten Lin Yuan's affirmation, he still felt like he was in a dream. Although a bronze legend fey had never appeared in the market, it was not that there were no bronze legend feys. However, bronze legend feys were the exclusive right of Class 5 creation masters. Even pinnacle Class 4 creation masters could occasionally succeed. However, after these pinnacle Class 4 creation masters nurtured bronze legend feys, how could they let them enter the market? Previously, when Lin Yuan had taken out those completely jade-textured wood, Hu Quan felt that he could not see through it. But now, Hu Quan looked at the wood weaving house centipede that was casually saying that he could take out a bronze legend fey. In that case, those completely jade-textured wood paled in comparison to this bronze legend wood weaving house centipede and did not deserve to be compared at all. This made Hu Quan understand how right his decision to join this mansion was. How much power did this cheerful youth contain? Could it be that Lin Yuan still had the resources of a Class 5 creation master? How much power did he have? Then, Hu Quan was immediately moved. In Hu Quan's eyes, Lin Yuan was going to use that precious Class 5 creation master's resources for him. At that moment, Hu Quan could not help but feel a sense of unswerving loyalty. This feeling of a gentleman dying for a bosom friend made Hu Quan's eyes turn a little red. Hu Quan poured himself another cup of Three Treasures tea and used it to suppress his surging emotions. After Lin Yuan left, Hu Quan turned to look at the youth on the feature wall that he had pieced together and could not help but say softly, "Since you treat me as a gentleman, I, Hu Quan, will repay you as a gentleman." Although it was still not easy for Lin Yuan to enhance a bronze legend fey by himself. If he were to enhance it himself, it would take him about 5 days. However, Lin Yuan felt that it was worth it to enhance a bronze legend fey for Hu Quan. After joining the mansion, Hu Quan made an oath, which was equivalent to signing the rest of his life to the mansion. Moreover, the agreement between Hu Quan and Lin Yuan had not changed. As long as Lin Yuan could have enough completely jade-textured wood for Hu Quan to use. Then, Hu Quan would forever be Lin Yuan's full-time spirit craftsman. To put it bluntly, even if Hu Quan became a Class 5 spirit craftsman, he would still be Lin Yuan's tool. Lin Yuan was aware of Hu Quan's efforts. Therefore, he felt that Hu Quan could afford a Bronze Legend Fei. However, after Lin Yuan promised to give Hu Quan a Bronze Legend wood weaving house centipede in 10 days, Hu Quan did not even have the chance to use it. He now had to bitterly return to the spirit lock spatial zone and start to enhance the wood weaving house centipede. At that moment, Morbius' voice suddenly echoed in Lin Yuan's mind. Lin Yuan, the total amount of spirit chi in a spirit chi crystal is equivalent to the spirit chi that you can infuse into a fei for 30 days. Therefore, one spirit chi crystal's spirit chi content can enhance about 5 to 6 Bronze Legend feis. You only need to crush a spirit chi crystal, and I will control the spiritual power in the spirit chi crystal to strengthen it. Upon hearing that, Lin Yuan's eyes lit up. To add more rewards for the life as a passerby there wasn't a single button left. Sweet dreams everyone end of chapter. Chapter 330. According to what Morbius had said just now, the spirit chi in the spirit chi crystals would not be wasted. One spirit chi crystal would allow 5 to 6 bronze feis to evolve from epic to legend. In that case, he wouldn't need to spend 5 days to upgrade a bronze fei from epic to legend. This would undoubtedly save Lin Yuan a lot of time. Lin Yuan had never thought of using Morbius spirit chi condensation to form spirit chi crystals to upgrade bronze feis quality. After the spirit chi crystals were crushed, they would turn into a huge amount of pure spirit chi. If Lin Yuan controlled this huge amount of pure spirit chi and used it on a few feis, some of it would undoubtedly leak out and be wasted. This huge amount of pure spirit chi would undoubtedly leak out and cause waste. Every bit of the pure spirit chi in the spirit chi crystals was wasted was not only equivalent to wasting Lin Yuan's time. At the same time, it was also a waste of a lot of radiance dollars and resources. This was because the spirit chi that leaked out could easily nurture many bronze epic feis. Although it was very easy for Lin Yuan to nurture bronze epic feis, every one of them would be crazily fought over by countless people. Lin Yuan had previously used spirit chi crystals to enhance his fantasy breed feis grades. Each spirit chi crystal could help a bronze X fantasy I fei break through to silver I fantasy I. Each spirit chi crystal could also upgrade a silver fantasy breed fei by a small grade. However, when a silver X fantasy I fei wanted to upgrade to gold I fantasy I, it would consume a total of 10 spirit chi crystals. After that, each small grade upgrade from Gold I Fantasy I to Gold X Fantasy I would consume nearly 10 spirit chi crystals. This way, if Lin Yuan wanted to nurture a Gold X Fantasy I fei, he would need to rely on the spirit chi crystals alone. He would need all the spirit chi crystals produced by Morbius spirit chi condensation for 2 years. This period was not small. Therefore, even if Lin Yuan rigged up enough resources and tried his best to use the spirit chi crystals condensed by Morbius spirit chi condensation, upgrading feis to gold fantasy breed was already the limit. Although Lin Yuan had not tried to use spirit chi crystals to upgrade gold X fantasy I feis to platinum I fantasy I, he was not sure how many spirit chi crystals he would need to consume. However, according to his calculations, he would need to consume at least 100. In fact, 100 might not be enough. At Morbius' current grade, using spirit chi crystals to enhance a fantasy breed feis quality would increase it to fantasy breed feis quality. It was even harder to upgrade a fantasy breed feis quality from fantasy I to fantasy II than to upgrade it to platinum. Therefore, he used these spirit chi crystals to increase the grade of his feis. After raising the feis grade to a certain level, there was very little effect if he wanted to increase them further. Only when Morbius advanced to a silver fantasy breed would its exclusive skill spirit lock spatial zone change again, and its ability spirit chi condensation would improve. Furthermore, it would not be easy for him to increase his rank from a C rank spirit chi professional to a B rank spirit chi professional. Lin Yuan's Chong body. Lin Yuan felt that the spirit chi in, and the spirit chi, which he, a spirit chi, a chi professional, and chi professional, Lin, spirit chi condensis Lin, yang rank. Yang that, the spirit, breed, spirit, yang spirit, Lin Yuan could feel his growth bit by bit as he increased his spirit chi professional rank. However, it depended on when it could comprehend the willpower rune suitable for the blue flash purple butterfly and the spirit gather goldfish. If this progress was fast, as long as Lin Yuan could comprehend the world willpower, Morbius would become a silver fantasy breed tomorrow. However, if it could not comprehend the willpower rune suitable for the spirit gather goldfish and the blue flash purple butterfly, it could only be stuck. Lin Yuan still had a willpower rune in his spiritual spatial zone that he could use. However, he would never use a willpower rune that was not suitable for a Fae to become a fantasy breed. Not only would it destroy his potential, but it would also be irresponsible to the Fae that would follow him for life. Lin Yuan still had to increase his strength. However, if Morbius could control the massive and pure spirit chi in the spirit chi crystals and enhance a few bronze legend Faes, it would be of great benefit to Lin Yuan's faction's development. Since Lin Yuan wanted to develop his faction into the aloof and mysterious floating cloud. Since Lin Yuan wanted to develop his faction into a proud and mysterious cloud in the horizon. Then this cloud must have the capital to float in the sky, the capital to be arrogant. Otherwise, a few gusts of wind and clouds would scatter into fog. However, since Lin Yuan had bronze legend phase, this floating cloud in the sky was destined to be a cloud that covered the sky. Since Morbius could use the spirit chi crystals to upgrade a bronze phase quality from epic to legend, it wouldn't take as long as 5 days. It would only take a while. Therefore, Lin Yuan was not in a hurry to enhance a bronze legend wood weaving house centipede for Hu Quan now. Moreover, Lin Yuan had already made plans for this batch of phase that could be enhanced to bronze legend. Lin Yuan had planned to enhance the dragon's mouth orchid from bronze epic to bronze legend, but he didn't dare to do so. Now, he could use this spirit chi crystal to enhance it. In addition to the wood weaving house centipede for Hu Quan, Lin Yuan still had 3 to 4 spots. The crane species Fae with a damaged genetic model did not need to directly absorb a large amount of pure and massive spirit chi. Instead, it needed to be slowly nourished under this massive and pure spirit chi and slowly make up for the missing genetic model. Therefore, Lin Yuan did not include this little fellow in the list. At that moment, Lin Yuan thought of the 3 dragon phoenix landscape carps. For a superior auspicious Fae like the dragon phoenix landscape carps, it would be better to enhance their quality to legend. Then, he would no longer suppress their grade and let them grow freely. Although this superior auspicious dragon phoenix landscape carp could represent supreme wealth by suppressing its grade to the bronze grade after being promoted to the legendary grade, it was a symbol of supreme wealth. However, in Lin Yuan's opinion, a superior auspicious Fae like the dragon phoenix landscape carps combined with the exclusive skill, place of life. The most important thing to do was to use its auspicious momentum to bless a place. In addition to the 3 dragon phoenix landscape carps, there were already 5 Faes. Lin Yuan planned to randomly choose a bronze epic Fae to enhance. However, whether this randomly chosen bronze epic Fae could be promoted to legend depended on whether the dragon's mouth orchid, the wood weaving house centipede, and the 3 dragon phoenix landscape carps would give them a chance. Wen Yu was currently in the garden outside the mansion, accompanying her contracted source-type Earth Surge Golden Lotus to bask in the sun. Lin Yuan originally planned to talk to Wen Yu about his idea of setting up a faction after he was done enhancing the phase. However, since Lin Yuan was not in a hurry to enhance the phase, he simply wanted to talk to Wen Yu about his plan to set up a faction. Lin Yuan admired Wen Yu's strategic ability to defeat all 5 factions in the Fae Battle Flag game last night. At that time, Wen Yu's deployment of resources and strategic ability to judge the situation had truly amazed Lin Yuan. In a sense, this kind of ability was 100 times more useful to a faction than the Creation Master's own talent. When Wen Yu, who was accompanying her contracted source-type Earth Surge Golden Lotus to bask in the sun, saw Lin Yuan walking over, she hurriedly said, "Young Master, look at this Earth Surge Golden Lotus's lotus heart. Young Master, look. The core of this Earthburst Golden Lotus has already turned golden. It's about to reach the gold level." Lin Yuan looked and nodded secretly. It seemed that Wen Yu's strength as a creation master had also improved significantly recently. This source-type Earth Surge Golden Lotus's lotus heart had turned gold and should be able to promote to gold within these 3 days. This meant that when you had reached the standard of a Class 2 Creation Master. Lin Yuan remembered that a few months ago, when you had come out of the Radiant Moon Palace to become his assistant, she had only been an intermediate Class 1 Creation Master. She had unknowingly grown so much during this period of time. Lin Yuan stood beside Wen Yu. Under the warm sun of the early winter, he spoke of his idea of building a faction. After hearing Lin Yuan's idea, Wen Yu looked at him with an inexplicable look. She suddenly understood a saying that she did not understand before. It turned out that some people were born to belong to the sky. Wen Yu clenched her fists. At this moment, a strong gale was rising from the ground. Then it should soar for 90,000 miles. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for everyone's support. Hee. Button had also written a book in the past, but he was a flop author. Writing was his hobby and had always been for self-entertainment. This book suddenly had results, and many readers liked it. At first, Button was happy like a 300-kilogram fatty. Later, he slowly felt pressure, just like yesterday's explosive chapters. I've always been afraid that my readers won't like it if I write so much. I've been doubting myself. But from everyone's reaction yesterday, it seems to be pretty good. Only then did the weight in his heart fall to the ground. In fact, it had always been Button's dream to write a book that people liked to read. He could use cheap strokes to communicate with everyone that very leisurely and warm world in his heart. He could convey the little bit of beauty in his heart to the readers. It was also the readers who had always let Button have the dream of being a flop author. Hee. He suddenly felt a little emotional. He was really grateful for everyone's support. Love you guys. Then, let's talk about the latest update. I owe your little fairy is mine 5 chapters of rewards and updates. I owe life as a passerby 3 chapters of rewards and updates. I owe your eyes are green. I owe you 1 chapter of rewards and update. There are a total of 9 chapters of rewards and updates. Button planned to continue updating 3 chapters every day. Then, under the premise of ensuring quality, he would release another explosive chapter of rewards and updates this week. Button would write this book properly and seriously. At the end, thank your little fairy is mine for becoming the leader of this book. Good night, everyone. End of this chapter. Chapter 331. It was the beginning of winter, and it was a very ordinary noon. Lin Yuan talked about his idea of establishing a faction as he usually chatted with Wen Yu. In just a few dozen minutes, Lin Yuan had clearly explained his plans for his faction. Upon seeing that Wen Yu was listening attentively, Lin Yuan simply asked, Wen Yu, what do you think is the most suitable path for me to take if I want to establish my own faction? Upon hearing Lin Yuan's words, Wen Yu replied without hesitation. Young master, if you want to develop your own private force, the path of accumulating resources is the most suitable. Lin Yuan nodded and motioned for Wen Yu to continue. He had only mentioned his plan to build a faction and his advantages, but he had not said his specific plan to develop his faction in the future. However, in his opinion, Wen Yu's point of view could be said to coincide with his development point of view to a certain extent. When Wen Yu saw that Lin Yuan did not directly state his position and wanted her to continue speaking, she felt a little embarrassed. Wen Yu pondered for a while and pondered for a full 5 minutes before speaking seriously. Young master, according to the idea of building a private force that you mentioned just now, it is most suitable for us to take the best route in terms of accumulating resources. The better the resources we offer, the greater the harvest for our force. Moreover, as long as we have the most luxurious resources, no one will not want to curry favor with us. That's why we have to use the best resources to prove our foundation. Once we release our foundation, the other forces will try their best to establish a relationship with us and use their luxurious resources to exchange for the luxurious resources in our hands. We just need to make sure that we have luxurious resources that they don't have, but that they desperately want. That way, we'll be able to grasp the other forces tightly and squeeze more resources from them than we're willing to pay. When Lin Yuan heard her words, he could not help but raise his eyebrows. She was indeed worthy of being the prodigal Wen Yu who had built the mansion. Her words were indeed extraordinary. However, when she expressed her thoughts in a few words, what she said about the development direction of the faction was almost completely in line with Lin Yuan's idea. In fact, when Wen Yu was expressing her thoughts, she was thinking about what had happened over the past month. Wen Yu had read the detailed information about the Radiance Federation's various factions in the Radiant Moon Palace's database and had expressed her feelings. Because she understood him, she would speak her mind in front of him. If she did not understand at all, she would not talk in front of him no matter what. At that moment, Lin Yuan's face revealed a bright smile. In fact, there were many ways to develop a private force, and not all of them were absolutely beneficial to the development of the force. However, if one wanted to develop a powerful force, then there could only be one voice in that force to make the main decisions. As for Lin Yuan's faction, he naturally had to make the main decisions. However, he wanted Wen Yu to help develop his faction as his assistant, so her voice must be consistent with his. Otherwise, even if she had a strong strategic talent in allocating resources and judging the situation, he would not let her play a supporting role in his faction's development. This was because if the two people's development routes were different and Lin Yuan and Wen Yu made different decisions, it would be equivalent to two forces. Even if these two forces wanted to pull the faction forward in one direction, the two forces would also invisibly restrain each other and divide the strength. Such development was not good for a private faction. However, based on the conversation just now, Lin Yuan knew Wen Yu's thoughts, and they happened to be in line. Then the private faction that Lin Yuan wanted to build could outline its embryonic form. At that moment, Wen Yu took a deep breath and said with a very serious expression, "Young master, how big do you want to build your faction?" At that moment, Lin Yuan took a deep breath and said with a very serious expression, "Young master, how big do you want to build your faction?" Upon hearing that, Lin Yuan raised his head and looked at the bright sun in the distance. The Radiance Federation is just a starting point. When Lin Yuan said this, he thought of the floating island whale that had yet to hatch in his spirit lock spatial zone. With the floating island whale, a behemoth that could build a sky city on its back, Lin Yuan's faction could not be limited to the Radiance Federation. Upon hearing Lin Yuan's words, Wen Yu clenched her fists. She felt Lin Yuan's big picture and the magnificent waves in his heart. As Lin Yuan's assistant, Wen Yu knew that she still needed to grow. However, in the face of Lin Yuan's plan to build a faction, Wen Yu was willing to put in all her effort to help outline the outline of this grand faction. Lin Yuan was originally looking at the bright sun in the sky when he heard Wen Yu say, "Young master, I'm ready to face all the challenges when building a faction in the future." Upon hearing Wen Yu's words, Lin Yuan smiled and said, "Relax. It won't be very difficult when we build a faction." When Lin Yuan decided to build a faction, he had actually anticipated everything he would face in his heart. After just 1.5 months, after experiencing the training in the controlled Class 3 Abyss Dimensional Rift, he had an additional yardstick to measure people's hearts and whether they were good or evil. Lin Yuan could completely remove the yardstick in his heart to measure whether he should do it or not. The establishment of a faction was not child's play, and it was not as simple as opening a small store on StarWeb. Lin Yuan's StarWeb store had always seemed to be calm and had no impact on Lin Yuan. However, it was not that no one had done anything. First, Lin Yuan's StarWeb store was self-produced and did not need to worry about the supply. Second, even if others were to cause trouble, the market demand for elite spirit siphon goldfish and silver usnias was simply too great. Even if someone wanted to cause trouble for Lin Yuan's Star Web Store, there was no good way. Therefore, Lin Yuan's Star Web Store had been developing so smoothly and steadily. However, the establishment of a faction would have to withstand the suppression of other factions at the very beginning. If it could not withstand the suppression of other factions, it would be forced out under the encroachment and collision of other factions. Of course, these were just the problems that some ordinary factions needed to face. Lin Yuan had the ability to easily take out Bronze Epic Phase. In fact, it was not difficult for him to even take out Bronze Legend Phase. He was confident that he could make other factions become bootlickers. However, the hardest thing for bootlickers was not to think about how to bootlick Lin Yuan's faction. It was that they could not bootlick Lin Yuan's faction even if they wanted to. Today's second update. End of this chapter. Chapter 332. Take Lin Yuan's Star Web Store as an example. When Lin Yuan's Star Web Store released the news of exchanging any quality of bronze epic phase for the day and night spirit silver and source type items, the targeting from the other Star Web stores had completely disappeared. As long as Lin Yuan showed his foundation, no Star Web store would dare to take out any kind of bronze epic phase. He would become enemies with a Star Web store that was suspected to be backed by an advanced Class 4 creation master. Similarly, as long as Lin Yuan's private faction could take out any kind of bronze epic phase, it did not even need to take out bronze legend phase. The other factions would crazily try to befriend it at all costs. These factions that crazily wanted to befriend Lin Yuan's private faction would think of all ways to curry favor with Lin Yuan's private faction. Some might even help Lin Yuan's private faction develop. However, Lin Yuan could only apologize to these factions. This was because Lin Yuan had already thought of his private faction's development model. Lin Yuan's development model was destined to make it impossible for these factions that wanted to befriend his private faction. After Lin Yuan took out the bronze epic phase and traded them a few times, he understood their value even more. The greatest value of bronze epic phase lay in their unparalleled attraction to spirit chi professionals who had comprehended willpower runes. This was because bronze epic phase were equivalent to a better future for those spirit chi professionals who had comprehended willpower runes. Most of the powerful factions had Class 4 creation masters presiding over them. Factions without Class 4 creation masters were far inferior to those with Class 4 creation masters presiding over them in terms of foundation. These factions with Class 4 creation masters presiding over them did not mean that they did not lack bronze epic phase. If a Class 4 creation master wanted to enhance a bronze epic phase, not only would he need to spend a lot of resources, but he would also need a lot of time to nurture it. The Class 4 creation masters in the large factions were all worshipped and did not always nurture phase. This caused the shortage of bronze epic phase. The king class experts that those large factions had might not be able to completely rank up to the Class 4 creation masters' resources. Not to mention the other people in the faction. These major factions with Class 4 creation masters were able to attract more king class experts to join them. Therefore, these major factions had become the buyers with the highest demand for bronze epic phase in the market. At present, there was no faction in the Radiance Federation that provided the service of customizing bronze epic phase based on the comprehended willpower rune. Such a service that allowed one to customize a bronze epic phase based on the comprehended willpower rune would mostly require an appointment with some Class 4 or Pinnacle Class 4 creation masters. In fact, if one wanted to make an appointment with a high-class or Pinnacle Class 4 creation master, even if they paid the price, they would have to spend a lot of connections and wait for a few years. Waiting for a few years was undoubtedly equivalent to not using the willpower rune for a few years after comprehending it. However, this was something that couldn't be helped, as high-grade or even Pinnacle Class 4 creation masters had such status and prestige. If you don't like to wait, there are a lot of people behind you who will thank you for being willing to wait. This was also why Lin Yuan had sent out the news of using any species of bronze epic phase to trade for items in the purchase with no loss store. Even if there were 3 source-type items among the items that Lin Yuan wanted to trade for, there were still so many people frantically trading for them, and the reason why it attracted so much attention. Therefore, Lin Yuan thought that since his faction's initial goal was to accumulate resources, he might as well let his faction be the first to eat crabs. To eat this crab, which was specially customized according to the different willpower rune comprehended by the spirit chi professionals, Lin Yuan didn't need any capital. This crab did not require any capital for Lin Yuan. Therefore, Lin Yuan was going to eat this crab. Not only was he going to eat it, but he was also going to eat it to his heart's content. Since he was going to eat it, how to eat it became the key. Therefore, Lin Yuan had to think about how to eat this crab in a mysterious, elegant, and pretentious manner. It was like eating a crab after breaking open the shell. If he did not even remove the crab gills and the crab heart, he would just chew the crab legs in his mouth. Although he had eaten the crab, it would be bad because of the crab gills and the crab heart. Moreover, chewing the crab legs would also lose the enjoyment and texture of eating the crab. However, if he ate it with the 8 crab pieces, it would be elegant, but it would be too troublesome. Lin Yuan didn't want to be bad when eating the crab, nor did he want to affect the taste. He didn't want to eat it too troublesome. Therefore, what Lin Yuan had to do was to set up a pot whenever he wanted to eat the crab. When the pot was set up, Lin Yuan would casually add a fire, and a large number of crabs would peel off their shells and scramble to jump into the pot. After these crabs steamed themselves, they even wanted to invite Lin Yuan to eat them. This was the highest satisfaction of being a crab eater. Lin Yuan already had his own plans on how to eat the crab. Now, Lin Yuan needed to enhance the vital fei, the oath lily of the valley, for his own plans. Of course, it was not just the oath lily of the valley. As a transmigrator who had lived one more lifetime than others, Lin Yuan understood the importance of quality and hunger marketing. Because of quality and hunger marketing, other factions would frantically compete for the opportunity to be a crab. Therefore, Lin Yuan could also start implementing the fate letter plan. At that moment, Lin Yuan suddenly felt his hand sink. When you put the watering can in her hand and said energetically, "Young master, I'll go to my room and write a proposal for you." After saying that, she hurriedly ran back to the mansion to write the proposal. Lin Yuan could not help but laugh involuntarily. Although when you had an extremely strong strategic talent in allocating resources and judging the situation, she was still a young girl and still needed to be tempered. At that moment, Lin Yuan found that when Yu's contracted source-type Earth Surge Golden Lotus was shaking its huge golden lotus-shaped flower, looking a little aggrieved. He didn't seem to understand why his contractor would abandon him here and run away all of a sudden. Upon seeing that, Lin Yuan took over Wen Yu's position and accompanied the source-type Earth Surge Golden Lotus to bask in the sun. He then regularly watered the Earth Surge Golden Lotus with the spirit liquid that Wen Yu had concocted in the spray bottle. When Lin Yuan saw that the spirit fluid that Wen Yu had concocted was almost done, he put the watering can on the side of the flower bed. At that moment, Lin Yuan had already decided that apart from the dragon's mouth orchid, the wood-weaving house centipede, and the three-tailed dragon phoenix landscape carp, he was going to use the dragon's mouth orchid. The sixth fei was the oath lily of the valley. Third watch tilde asking for tickets, end of chapter. Chapter 333. If he wanted to build his own faction, he would have to wait until the floating island whale hatched from the crystal eggshell. Then he would build a sky city on the back of the floating island whale. At the same time, he wanted to establish his faction's territory on Star Web. To a certain extent, Star Web could now be regarded as the Radiance Federation's second world. There might even be more things that could be done on Star Web than in reality. This was because the Radiance Federation's territory was simply too big. Even if a Diamond Fae wanted to cross between two large cities, it would take at least 2 months. If one of the two large cities was in the southernmost and the other in the northernmost, it would take at least 2 months. Therefore, it was most convenient to negotiate and trade on Star Web for some unimportant matters. It was easy to apply for a guild club in the Guild Alliance. However, if the Guild Club wanted to be recognized by the Guild Alliance afterward, it would be registered in the Guild Alliance to participate in the S tournament. After establishing the Guild Club's base, there would still be a lot of inspections. However, it was different if he wanted to establish a faction. There was no need to go through so much trouble. If he wanted to establish a faction, he just needed to prove his foundation to the Radiance Federation. This kind of foundation did not refer to wealth but martial strength. As long as one had pinnacle king-class combat power, he could apply to establish his own faction on Star Web. Establishing a faction on Star Web was different from opening a Star Web store. For example, as the Star Web store's level increased, the store's area would increase. At the same time, all the decorations in the Star Web store could be purchased in the store. It did not have to be something that existed in reality. It could be scanned through the Star Web card and placed in the store. However, if he wanted to establish a faction on Star Web, it would be no different from establishing his faction in reality. To establish a faction on Star Web, one would first need to buy a piece of territory on Star Web. The size of the territory on Star Web that was specially used to establish a faction was almost equivalent to the base of a Guild Alliance's B-Class Guild Club in the S tournament. Factions that bought territories on the Star Web could build their own facilities in the territory. However, the setup of the faction needed to be scanned in by the Star Web card before it was allowed to be placed in the faction. Because of this, the foundation of these private factions could be seen from the construction of the territory. Furthermore, there had always been a limit to how many items could be scanned by the star web card and entered into the star web. An item, be it a fey or a spiritual ingredient, could only be scanned by one star web card, and it could only be scanned once. It was precisely because of this reason that many of the newly established factions on Star Web would run over to the veteran factions. He would spend a large number of Radiance dollars to apply to scan some of the items that had not been scanned by the Star Web card and that could support his reputation. For example, some ornaments or furniture made of jade-textured wood. For ornaments or furniture made of completely jade-textured wood, no matter how much money was offered, those veteran forces would not lend them out. This was because an item made of completely jade-textured wood, which represented their foundation, was not enough for the veteran forces. On the surface, some of the newly established forces had already reached the level of veteran forces. However, the veteran powers looked down on these newly established powers. That was because these rising forces were inferior to the veteran forces in terms of foundation. To a certain extent, some of the veteran forces with deep foundations were more likely to compete with the rising forces. This was like a chain of contempt. The veteran forces relied on their rich resources and felt that the rising forces were just a group of nouveau riche gathered together. They did not have a foundation that had settled down over the years. However, they had to admit that these veteran forces were indeed stronger than the rising forces. That was because sometimes, having resources could indeed represent strength. Compared to those rising forces, the veteran forces could obtain the loyalty of those king-class experts more easily. This was because those king-class experts didn't just need to consume resources to nurture their contracted phase. They also needed to comprehend willpower runes and save up resources to exchange for high-quality bronze phase. It could be said that they needed to consume a lot of resources at all times. Some of the descendants of the wealthy clans did not need to worry about the demand for these resources, but for those spirit chi professionals who had ordinary families and had to rely on themselves to work hard. If they wanted to go further after reaching king class, it was often much easier to join some veteran forces than to work hard on their own. Take the king class expert squad that Lin Yuan had participated in for an example. This king class expert squad did not rely on the veteran forces. Instead, a few pinnacle king-class experts huddled together for warmth. It was also because of this reason that after 2 of the squad members comprehended willpower runes, they still needed to integrate resources before they could exchange for bronze epic phase. It could be seen that the resources that the king-class experts needed to consume and the resources that they could earn were not proportional. They needed to consume more. This was a king-class expert squad that huddled together for warmth. How could those king-class experts who were alone have it easy? Therefore, for these king-class experts who were alone, joining a veteran faction was the best choice. It was also because of this that the veteran factions often had many forces hidden in the dark. They were unlike those rising forces that liked to put all their forces in the light to attract more people to join. However, the strength of such a rising faction and a veteran faction was not absolute. Such variables could be triggered by those high-class creation masters. If a rising faction without too much foundation had the support of a Class 4 creation master, it would quickly be promoted to a veteran faction. It would slowly be recognized by other veteran factions. In any case, Lin Yuan wanted to establish his private faction on Star Web. Therefore, the first step was to purchase a piece of land to establish his private faction. Lin Yuan was not worried at all about the application for a private faction on Star Web. A pinnacle king-class expert could apply for a private faction, and it was no longer a problem for Lin Yuan. As Lin Yuan's guardian, Endless Summer was naturally considered his subordinate. As a suzerain Myth 3 Fey, Endless Summer's strength had already reached the standard of an Emperor-class spirit chi professional. As long as the application reached the standard, it would be approved. Therefore, Lin Yuan was not thinking about how to apply to establish his own private faction. Instead, he was thinking about how to arrange his private faction's territory. Chapter 1 End of this chapter. Chapter 334. Lin Yuan had a lot of good stuff in his hands, and if he was willing to take them out, he would be able to do so. If he was willing to take them out, It would not be difficult for him to arrange his faction's territory. However, Lin Yuan did not intend to spend effort to arrange the environment outside his faction's territory. Spending effort to arrange and build the environment outside his faction's territory was equivalent to wasting his time. The floating island whale had not hatched yet. If Lin Yuan prepared a large number of phase and spiritual materials to use the star web card to scan and use them to arrange the territory, it would be equivalent to wasting a batch of resources in his hands. It would be equivalent to throwing a batch of resources into his hands to arrange the external environment of Star Web's private territory. If the scanned items were sold, these items would also disappear from Star Web's private territory. After each transaction, the number of times the Star Web card had scanned these items would be refreshed. Since Lin Yuan wanted to build a low-key and mysterious faction, he did not need to spend effort to build the external environment of his faction. However, Lin Yuan still had to spend some effort on the internal layout of his faction. As for the internal construction of his faction, he needed to fully display his foundation. Although Lin Yuan had a design plan for the internal construction of his private territory, he only had the design plan. However, Lin Yuan only had a design plan and not the spirit craftsmanship in this aspect. Therefore, Lin Yuan needed to let Hu Quan realize the design in his mind through his superb spirit craftsmanship. Hu Quan's craftsmanship was already at the level of a Class 5 spirit craftsman and could fully undertake the arrangement arranged by Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan's private faction's operation mode on Star Web relied entirely on the fate letters. As for the fate letters, Lin Yuan chose Spirit Chi professionals who had comprehended willpower runes to privately customize bronze epic phase suitable for willpower runes. Lin Yuan planned to let his private faction send out 100 fate letters through auction every 3 days. Experts, wealthy families, and even major factions would use Radiance dollars as chips to compete for these fate letters. This competition was only for the possibility of obtaining the opportunity to privately customize bronze epic phase according to the Spirit Chi professionals' comprehended willpower runes. Experts, wealthy families, and even major factions who came to participate in the auction of the fate letters could only auction 1 fate letter each. After 100 fate letters were auctioned, the 100 factions that had won the 100 fate letters could use Star Web's automatic lottery function. These 100 fate letters would be randomly distributed to the 100 factions that had bought them. Among these 100 fate letters, 99 of them had black wings drawn on them. Such letters were called ash letters. The ribbon ash letters represented not obtaining the opportunity to privately customize bronze epic phase according to the willpower runes they comprehended. Among these 100 fate letters, only 1 letter had white wings drawn on it. This letter was called an angel letter. Drawing the angel letter was equivalent to obtaining the opportunity to customize a bronze epic fey based on the willpower rune that one had comprehended. If the faction that drew the angel letter wanted to use this opportunity, it would have to pay 3 source-type items of any choice and make an exchange oath. When the next fate letter was sent out 3 days later, he would be able to collect a custom-made bronze epic fey based on the willpower rune that he comprehended. As of the exchange, Lin Yuan of A2 of the exchange when he needed 2 of it. As long as Lin Yuan could take out resources of the same value, the faction that had previously received the angel's letter and made an exchange oath would have to unconditionally agree to Lin Yuan's request to exchange resources. Such resources could be phase or spiritual ingredients. The exchange oath was the reason why Lin Yuan needed to enhance the oath lily of the valley. The oath lily of the valley was a plant that was about 30 centimeters tall and had bell-shaped white flowers on its leaves. The oath lily of the valley's ability was that each of its bell-shaped white flowers could be used as a carrier to undertake the oath. Spirit Chi professionals with willpower runes could directly swear to the oath lily of the valley. After the oath lily of the valley and the Spirit Chi professional reached an exchange oath, the original white bell-shaped flower would turn golden. The golden oath lily of the valley that carried the exchange oath would fall from the oath lily of the valley. At the same time, a new white oath lily of the valley flower would grow at the spot where the oath lily of the valley flower had fallen. At the same time, a new white oath lily of the valley flower would grow at the spot where the oath lily of the valley flower had fallen. This golden oath lily of the valley flower, which bore the weight of the oath of exchange, was equivalent to proof of this. If the exchange contract was completed, the golden oath lily of the valley flower would wither. However, if the exchange oath on the golden oath lily of the valley flower was unilaterally broken, the oath lily of the valley would unleash the curse effect that was unique to phase like the oath lily of the valley. This curse effect would seal the spirit chi professional's willpower rune that they had used to swear the exchange oath. This was the same as the violator wasting a willpower rune that could not be used. Such a punishment was severe. Although the punishment for swearing the exchange oath was severe, it was extremely fair as long as it was not a violation. Otherwise, if everyone was customizing bronze epic phase based on the willpower runes they comprehended, it would be too troublesome. It would be too troublesome if they had to issue an exchange oath with the faction owner every 3 days. Moreover, Lin Yuan did not have the time to stand inside his faction's territory every 3 days and wait for the buyers who had received the angel's letter to swear the exchange oath. This way, Lin Yuan would become the mailbox to receive the exchange oath. The Oath Lily of the Valley could completely take over this job. In fact, in the Radiance Federation, it was rare to use the willpower rune to swear the Oath Lily of the Valley. It could even be said to be very rare. In a certain sense, the Oath Lily of the Valley was the privilege of Class 4 creation masters. The Oath Lily of the Valley could only accept the effect of the oath when it was at legend. The Oath Lily of the Valley did not need to be at bronze to reach legend. Gold, platinum, and even diamond Oath Lily of the Valley would have the same effect when it reached legend. Therefore, for some Class 4 creation masters, it was not difficult to raise the Oath Lily of the Valley to legend when it was at gold or platinum. However, Lin Yuan did not intend to do so. He intended to nurture a bronze legend Oath Lily of the Valley. This bronze legend Oath Lily of the Valley was enough to represent Lin Yuan's faction's foundation. It could be said that just this bronze legend Oath Lily of the Valley was much more shocking than a bunch of fancy and exquisite items placed outside his private territory. This was the most direct way for Lin Yuan to express his faction's foundation to other factions. Of course, this was just a way for Lin Yuan to express his faction's foundation. With that thought in mind, Lin Yuan returned to his room and logged into the Star Web. He was going to purchase a wood weaving house centipede and an Oath Lily of the Valley on the Star Web to enhance them. As soon as he logged into the Star Web, Lin Yuan saw that he had received a reply to the message he had sent to Listen. This time, the content of the reply seemed to be even more anxious than before. Second update tilde asking for votes, end of this chapter. Chapter 335. Lin Yuan found that Listen had sent 3 more messages this time. Listen, thank you for your help. Thank you so much. I just don't know when you will have time to help upgrade the phase quality. Listen, can I add another source type item and ask you to help promote those 2 phase from Bronze Flawless to Bronze Epic within 17 days? Listen, expert. Lin Yuan raised his brows when he saw Listen's message, and then the expression on his face could not help but become a little playful. Based on the 3 messages from Listen, Lin Yuan could see it. Listen should really have encountered some urgent trouble. Listen wanted to get 2 chances to enhance the phase quality from Lin Yuan and upgrade them from Bronze Flawless to Bronze Epic. This was just a transaction and not complicated. Lin Yuan had already finalized the transaction, but Listen was willing to take out 1 more source type item. Listen had taken out this source type item in hopes that Lin Yuan could upgrade those 2 phase from Bronze Flawless to Bronze Epic within a certain time. This showed that Listen was very anxious to complete the promotion of those 2 phase from Bronze Flawless to Bronze Epic within 17 days. Otherwise, it was rare for a normal buyer to be willing to take out 1 more source type item after the seller had decided to trade. After all, source type items could not be bought with radiance dollars like 1 cubic meter of day and night spirit silver. Lin Yuan had only seen Listen's message a few days ago when he logged on Star Web last night. Lin Yuan had also logged off Star Web last night after replying to Listen. When Lin Yuan logged on Star Web again in the morning, he found that Listen had just logged off Star Web yesterday. He had immediately replied to Lin Yuan's message. Of course, Listen had only replied to the first 2 messages last night. As for the 3rd message, expert, Listen had just sent it not long ago. There was no content like the 3rd message. It was like he was trying to find something to talk about. This greatly showed how anxious Listen was while waiting for Lin Yuan's reply. This feeling was like when you had something very urgent to do and sent a message to the other party. However, the other party had not replied for a long time, so sometimes when you were extremely anxious, you would send another message. The purpose was to test if the other party had not seen your message before. Listen had such a high EQ and ability to deal with people, so how could he not know this? Therefore, Lin Yuan knew that this would happen, which meant that Listen's heart was in a mess. Lin Yuan felt Listen's anxiety, so he did not make things difficult for him. Instead, he returned. Just follow the previous transaction. I can complete the enhancement of phase quality within 17 days. There's no need to add a new source type item. After replying to Listen's message, Lin Yuan began to log on web as usual. He purchased a wood-weaving house centipede and an oath lily of the valley on the star web. The wood-weaving house centipede was not considered a cheap fae among all the normal faes. On the contrary, the normal wood-weaving house centipede was much more expensive than most other normal faes. This was due to the wood-weaving house centipede faes being favored by spirit craftsmen. As for the oath lily of the valley, it was very common on the star web. It could even be said that the oath lily of the valley's status among faes was not much different from the brocade pearl that Lin Yuan had purchased. They were the kind of things that almost no one would buy if they were put on the shelves. However, if one wanted to compare, the oath lily of the valley was slightly better than the oath lily in the market. After all, the oath lily of the valley was pleasing to the eye. In terms of appearance, the oath of the lily of the valley could be placed there as an ornament, but it was still better than the inconspicuous pearl on a brocade. The oath lily of the valley was despised because it was a healing type fae. During the healing process, it would make people want to face the pain of death. However, the oath lily of the valley was despised because it was only useful when it reached legend. The oath lily of the valley was a fae that would only undergo a qualitative change when it reached legend. There were many oath lilies of the valley for sale in the market, but there weren't many people who could upgrade them to legendary quality. Even if there were, no one would be willing to nurture them. After all, creation masters with the strength and experience were more willing to nurture combat class faes that could fight. Lin Yuan quickly placed an order for the wood-weaving house centipede and the oath lily of the valley. He just had to wait for Ostrich Logistics to deliver the wood-weaving house centipede and the oath lily of the valley. After buying the faes he needed, Lin Yuan looked at the message bar and saw Listen's reply. Lin Yuan clicked on the message and saw Listen's reply. Listen, expert, I have a total of 11 source type items here. How about you choose 6 of them that are most useful to you? Lin Yuan frowned slightly when he saw Listen's message. Lin Yuan could feel that there was a hidden meaning in Listen's words, but Listen did not directly say the hidden meaning. It was not as simple as it seemed. If Listen wanted to express goodwill and let Lin Yuan choose 6 source type items from a certain amount, it would be the number of source type items agreed upon during the transaction. Lin Yuan felt that there was nothing he could not understand. In fact, many factions would also use this method to express goodwill when trading with creation masters. Anyway, the source type items that these factions took out for trading were already useless to their faction. If they could use things that were useless to their faction to express goodwill to creation masters, it would simply be an excellent thing. After all, there were only benefits and no disadvantages to giving a good impression to creation masters. However, such factions would not say how many source type items they had, and the source type items they took out for the creation masters to choose were also integers. However, Listen directly spread out his faction's trump card in front of Lin Yuan. Listen now only had a total of 11 source type items, which was not good. All of Listen's source type item resource reserves could not be compared to some small factions at all. It could even be said that the source type item resource reserves that Listen currently had could not be called a faction. Moreover, who would hand over their trump card for no reason unless they had other plans? Listen's approach gave Lin Yuan a strange feeling. Listen didn't want to rely on me after handing over my trump card, right? Yesterday's third chapter / today's third chapter will be posted together from noon to afternoon. Asking for tickets / end of this chapter. Chapter 336. Just as Lin Yuan frowned slightly and was about to reply to the message, However, he did not know that Listen, who was talking to him on the other end of the star web, was also a youth. Listen might be slightly older than Lin Yuan, but Lin Yuan was a little older than him. However, Listen was undoubtedly much younger than Liu Jie. At that moment, Listen was pursing his lips tightly, and the corners of his eyes revealed a deep sense of fatigue. However, the frown between Listen's brows, which had just relaxed, indicated that the burden in his heart had been lifted. Listen looked at Deep Mountain Elder Lin's message, just follow the previous deal. The phase quality enhancement can be completed within 17 days. There is no need to add a new source type item. He didn't know why, but he felt boundless gratitude in his heart. Finally, someone was willing to help him at his most difficult moment. Listen had been looking forward to the Listening Heron Chamber of Commerce's future in high spirits. However, he did not expect that in less than a month, fate would play such a big joke on him. Listen was the only direct descendant of the Listening Heron Chamber of Commerce. But 3 years ago, when the Listening Heron Chamber of Commerce had set its development goal on the ocean, the calamity in the sea had caused the Listening Heron Chamber of Commerce's core members, who were also Listen's relatives, to perish in the sea. Only Listen, who had yet to reach adulthood at that time, was left alone in the Listening Heron Chamber of Commerce. At that time, Listen, who was only 17 years old, gritted his teeth and carried the Listening Heron Chamber of Commerce on his own. In the past 3 years, Listen had put in a lot of effort to revitalize the Listening Heron Chamber of Commerce and accumulate some resources. The Listening Heron Chamber of Commerce originally had 5 Class 3 Creation Masters. There was even a Class 3 Creation Master who was at the pinnacle of Class 3 and might break through to become a Class 4 Creation Master at any moment. These 5 Class 3 Creation Masters had been working in the Listening Heron Chamber of Commerce for more than a decade before it had set its development goal on the ocean. Although these people were not Listen's direct relatives, they were still his uncles. In the past 3 years, Listen had spent almost half of the resources earned by the Listening Heron Chamber of Commerce on this pinnacle Class 3 Creation Master. He was wholeheartedly trying to make this pinnacle Class 3 Creation Master strive to become a Class 4 Creation Master. The Listening Heron Chamber of Commerce's Class 3 Creation Master finally succeeded in advancing to a Class 4 Creation Master. However, he did not expect that after this pinnacle Class 3 Creation Master of the Listening Heron Chamber of Commerce became a Class 4 Creation Master. He took the Listening Heron Chamber of Commerce's remaining 4 Creation Masters and joined a veteran faction. This was a huge blow to the already weak Listening Heron Chamber of Commerce. Listen had originally pinned all his hopes on the pinnacle Class 3 Creation Master from his Chamber of Commerce. When this pinnacle Class 3 Creation Master became a Class 4 Creation Master, the Listening Heron Chamber of Commerce might even advance from a rising faction to a veteran faction with a Class 4 Creation Master overseeing it. These Class 3 and Pinnacle Class 3 Creation Masters had been the backbone of the Listening Heron Chamber of Commerce since Listen was young. Therefore, when Listen had been pouring a large amount of resources into this Pinnacle Class 3 Creation Master and helping him break through to become a Class 4 Creation Master, he had not said anything. He wanted this Pinnacle Class 3 Creation Master to use a willpower rune to swear an eternal loyalty to the Listening Heron Chamber of Commerce. Of course, even if Listen wanted to make this Pinnacle Class 3 Creation Master swear, he was not qualified. Moreover, the Listening Heron Chamber of Commerce had long set its development goal on the ocean. When it encountered a calamity at sea, it had already lost the Listening Heron Chamber of Commerce's top martial force. Without the protection of martial force, the Listening Heron Chamber of Commerce was just a fish on the chopping block in front of other factions. Had it not been for Listen racking his brains to deal with them, the Listening Heron Chamber of Commerce would have long been nibbled away. Listen himself was not a creation master, and the Listening Heron Chamber of Commerce did not have very abundant resources when it encountered a huge change. Therefore, the Listening Heron Chamber of Commerce still had to rely on the 4 Class 3 Creation Masters and the Pinnacle Class 3 Creation Master who had already broken through to become a Class 4 Creation Master. In fact, even a Class 3 Creation Master would not easily use a willpower rune to swear allegiance to any faction. This was because only other Spirit Chi professionals and factions in this world would use a willpower rune to swear to a high-class Creation Master. This pinnacle Class 3 Creation Master had become a Class 4 Creation Master after eating a large amount of the listening Heron Chamber of Commerce's resources. However, this pinnacle Class 3 Creation Master had also earned huge benefits for the listening Heron Chamber of Commerce. It could even be said that the listening Heron Chamber of Commerce's 3 years of high-class resources had been earned by this pinnacle Class 3 Creation Master. There were times when some Creation Masters would swear allegiance to certain factions, but the Creation Masters were different. However, this kind of allegiance generally only existed for veteran factions like Wind Mist City's richest family, the GAO family, which had a huge foundation. This kind of allegiance generally had a set time limit. After reaching a certain time limit, the effect of the oath would be lifted. This was also the reason why some Class 1 and Class 2 Creation Masters were willing to pay a few years of freedom to pledge allegiance to veteran factions in exchange for a chance to grow. After the pinnacle Class 3 Creation Master of the listening Heron Chamber of Commerce became a Class 4 Creation Master, he left with the other 3 Creation Masters. This situation was equivalent to the listening Heron Chamber of Commerce's spring that might have just gushed out, but the spring's mouth had been taken away. Not only that, but if it was just this, the favors that Listen had made would also allow the listening Heron Chamber of Commerce to tide over the difficulties. However, it was almost difficult for the listening Heron Chamber of Commerce to rise again after losing its source. After this happened, Listen forcefully held on and stabilized the situation within a week. However, less than a day after stabilizing the situation, misfortune never came alone. At that moment, a veteran faction revealed its hidden venomous fangs. In fact, this veteran faction had been eyeing the listening Heron Chamber of Commerce for a long time. This veteran faction had paid a huge price to sign an exchange oath with the listening Heron Chamber of Commerce a year ago. This exchange oath was to exchange for 2 chances to upgrade a bronze flawless Fey to bronze epic from the listening Heron Chamber of Commerce. If Listen could complete this exchange requirement, he would get a lot of resources. He would even get help from this veteran faction in some other aspects. However, if the exchange oath failed, then Listen had to agree to let this veteran faction intervene and develop the listening Heron Chamber of Commerce together. The reason Listen had signed this exchange oath was that this exchange oath would only be beneficial to the listening Heron Chamber of Commerce under the circumstances at that time. However, after the pinnacle Class 3 Creation Master that the listening Heron Chamber of Commerce had nurtured became a Class 4 Creation Master, he had left the listening Heron Chamber of Commerce with the other 3 Creation Masters. This had completely changed the situation. Today's first update. End of this chapter. Chapter 337. Listen also understood that he had been schemed against by this veteran faction. The listening Heron Chamber of Commerce's Creation Master had left. Although this veteran faction did not directly appear, there was a faint shadow of this veteran faction. In the current situation, if Listen let this veteran faction intervene in the listening Heron Chamber of Commerce's development. After this veteran faction entered the listening Heron Chamber of Commerce, Listen would not have the strength to resist at all. Perhaps in less than a month, the listening Heron Chamber of Commerce would be equivalent to completely changing hands with this veteran faction. Therefore, at this critical moment, Listen used all the connections he had maintained over the years. But in the end, Listen found that his connections were not qualified to touch the category of a Class 4 Creation Master. Even if he raised the market price and took out more source-type items, he still did not have this qualification. This made Listen, who already knew how precious a Class 4 Creation Master's resources were, understand even more how powerful and terrifying they were. At the last moment, Listen suddenly thought of Lin Yuan, who had only traded once before. Lin Yuan had become Listen's last life-saving straw. Listen did not have much hope and just wanted to try his best. However, he did not expect that this life-saving straw that Lin Yuan had wanted to grab would become a driftwood that could save him. Deep gratitude emerged in Listen's originally exhausted expression. Suddenly, Listen's heart sank. Before Lin Yuan replied to the message, he solemnly typed a message. "Listen, I wonder if the expert is interested in the Chamber of Commerce." After sending this message, Listen seemed to have lost all his strength. He had used all his abilities and means to protect the listening Heron Chamber of Commerce in the past 3 years. Listen had always had a clear understanding of himself. He knew that his extremely high emotional intelligence and ability to win people's hearts were not worth mentioning in the face of a veteran faction. There was a limit to one's strength. Listen had always positioned his talent in development and not in production resources. However, the listening Heron Chamber of Commerce had always given him a mess. There were simply no resources and time for Listen to use them to develop the listening Heron Chamber of Commerce. However, Listen's heart was already relaxed at this moment. This was already the last effort that Listen could do for the listening Heron Chamber of Commerce. Lin Yuan was about to reply to Listen's message, but he did not expect that before he could reply, Listen had already sent another message. Upon seeing Listen's message, Lin Yuan could not help but smirk and sigh in his heart. It seemed that he had guessed correctly. Lin Yuan had not intended to respond to Listen. He only wanted to complete the transaction and obtain the 6 source-type items to accumulate resources. However, when Lin Yuan saw the words Chamber of Commerce, he was rather moved. Most of the stores that sold spiritual ingredients and phase on the star web came from large and small chambers of commerce. For example, the energy ores, butterfly shell flowers, and spirit siphon goldfish that he had purchased from Starweb's Jujusin store were actually supplied by these chambers of commerce. Some precious phase and spiritual materials usually had to be purchased or auctioned in the Rare Lifeform Pavilion on the Star Web. However, the Radiance Federation's merchant associations occupied half of the daily consumption of ordinary spiritual ingredients and ordinary phase that had a high circulation rate. Lin Yuan needed to consume a lot of low-grade resources daily, and the consumption of energy ores was increasing. If he could control a chamber of commerce, it would be much more convenient for him to do anything in the future. In the future, he would no longer have to go through so much trouble to purchase low-grade spiritual ingredients and energy ores on the Star Web. The price of obtaining resources directly from the Chamber of Commerce was different on the Star Web. Even if Lin Yuan bought resources from Jujusin's store, he would still be earning a portion of his own money, which was already much more favorable. However, the price was also very different from obtaining resources directly from the Chamber of Commerce. It was already extremely difficult to apply for a Chamber of Commerce's qualification in the Radiance Federation. Moreover, the most valuable thing about a Chamber of Commerce was not just the qualification but those small, meticulous channels. Every time a Chamber of Commerce established a relationship with a Star Web store, it was equivalent to having a stable income. Therefore, in the eyes of a faction, even a small Chamber of Commerce was considered a high-quality resource. This was also why veteran factions had their eyes on the listening Heron Chamber of Commerce, which had been in decline at that time. Lin Yuan felt that he should meet Listen on the Star Web. He sent a message. Deep Mountain Elder Lin, bring your 11 source-type items to the Star Web Guest Center. After saying that, Lin Yuan set off first. When Listen saw Lin Yuan's message, he, who had just put down his worries and relaxed, suddenly felt his blood rush to his brain. He felt nervous and perturbed. This was because Listen did not see Lin Yuan's true thoughts from his message. It was reasonable to say that Lin Yuan asking him to meet on Star Web was equivalent to giving him a chance to talk face to face. However, Lin Yuan had asked him to bring 11 source-type items and seemed to just want to choose the source-type items to complete the previous transaction. Listen was originally disheartened, but now, he seemed to see a faint ray of hope amidst this perturbed. Listen was not afraid that hope was rare, but he was afraid that he would not even have the chance to grasp it. At that moment, Listen's heart became abnormally firm. How could a person who could be drowned by the fierce waves at any time not seize this rare opportunity? However, this hope of holding on to his courage was given to him by Deep Mountain Elder Lin, whom he had only made a transaction with once before. This feeling of there is no way out after the mountains and rivers are heavy, and there is a glimmer of hope at the end of the tunnel. It made Listen, who was used to relying on himself and had no one to rely on, feel extremely cherished. However, Listen still needed to fight for this path with all his might. This was because he knew that the listening Heron Chamber of Commerce that he owned was not worth mentioning in front of a faction that could casually take out Bronze Epic Phase. Listen set off with a firm and perturbed mood and headed to the Star Web Guest Center that Lin Yuan had agreed on. When he arrived at the appointed room in the Star Web Guest Center, Listen saw a sunny youth with a natural aura sitting there quietly, waiting for him. A hint of shock flashed in Listen's eyes. He had heard that the purchase with no loss star web store's owner was a young man. Many people even compared the purchase with no loss store's owner with the young hero, Black. However, Listen had never really believed these words. He really could not imagine that this faction, which clearly had a pinnacle class 4 creation master and could easily take out bronze epic phase, was owned by a young man. Second update — end of this chapter. Chapter 338. Lin Yuan saw Listen in a daze and smiled brightly. Sit down and talk. Listen did not expect Lin Yuan to be so young. In fact, Lin Yuan did not expect Listen to be so young. He looked like he was only about 20 years old. Lin Yuan would not look down on Listen because of his young age. On the contrary, Lin Yuan thought highly of Listen because of his age. A high EQ and the ability to win people's hearts might be excellent in an older person, but it was not considered valuable. Under the tempering of time, adults who had experienced the ways of the world were always more tactful. However, Listen had such a high EQ and the ability to win people's hearts at such a young age. Lin Yuan could not help but sigh. Although Listen was shocked, he was grateful to Lin Yuan from the bottom of his heart. The young man in front of him, who had helped him in a desperate situation, might have just done a trivial thing to him. But to Listen, it was the most precious salvation. Since Listen had been firm about his plan. At that moment, Listen did not sit face to face with Lin Yuan. Instead, he knelt on one knee devoutly, put the Listening Heron Chamber of Commerce's remaining 11 source-type items on a tray, and raised it in front of the young man. Expert, I want to offer the Listening Heron Chamber of Commerce to get your protection. I only hope that you can protect the Listening Heron Chamber of Commerce and let me develop it. In the future, the Listening Heron Chamber of Commerce and everything I have will be yours. Lin Yuan did not expect Listen to do this after entering the door and seeing him. Lin Yuan fell into deep thought. Since Listen said he wanted him to protect the Listening Heron Chamber of Commerce, Lin Yuan had to weigh the pros and cons. Should he protect the Listening Heron Chamber of Commerce in trouble? Was the Listening Heron Chamber of Commerce's value worth protecting? While thinking, Lin Yuan could clearly feel Listen's hand, which was holding the tray containing the 11 source-type items, trembling slightly. It showed Listen's apprehension at that moment. However, the more silent Lin Yuan was, the tighter Listen's heart was, and the farther the hope in his heart was from him. At that moment, Listen's mind suddenly became very chaotic. For some reason, he thought of two kinds of food. One was pickled fish with pickled vegetables, and the other was braised chicken. Listen felt that he was a pickled fish with pickled vegetables, sour, vegetable, and extra. He still felt that he was a braised chicken, flustered, stuffy, and trash. And at that moment, Listen suddenly felt the 11 source-type items on the tray move. Listen knew that Lin Yuan had started to observe the source-type item in the tray. This made Listen's heart tighten, and the corners of his eyes turned a little red. However, the corners of Listen's mouth curled up. I only hope that you can protect the Listening Heron Chamber of Commerce and let it continue to develop. In the future, everything that belongs to the Listening Heron Chamber of Commerce and me will be yours. Listen had already let go of his insistence. It didn't matter if he wasn't around to develop the Listening Heron Chamber of Commerce. It would be fine as long as the Listening Heron Chamber of Commerce that his father's generation had painstakingly supported could continue to exist. Lin Yuan was playing with the source-type item in the tray and pondering. Lin Yuan threw the source-type items in his hand onto the tray, making a crisp sound. Listen's hand that was holding the tray trembled. At that moment, Listen heard the youth's calm voice. If you pledge allegiance to the Listening Heron Chamber of Commerce, then you will naturally manage it. It seems that there are some things that can't be said on StarWeb today. Upon hearing the youth's words, Listen was wrapped in ecstasy and froze on the spot. At that moment, he heard the youth's calm voice again. Come to the royal capital. Let's meet and talk in reality. Listen only felt that the holy sound that dispelled the haze pierced his ears and brushed away the tiredness and uneasiness of more than a month. At the same time, Listen's eyes flashed with a dazzling light of hope. Listen knew that since a bigwig like the youth in front of him said that he wanted to meet and talk with him in reality, it meant that there was a great chance of this matter being half done. Listen raised his head and said with a carefree smile that had been suppressed by the haze for a long time, "I'm in Indigo Azure City. I'll go to the royal capital now." Lin Yuan and Listen made a verbal agreement on Starweb and left Starweb. Lin Yuan felt that Listen's sudden and decisive decision was a little sudden. However, he was more impressed by Listen's amazing courage in addition to his high EQ and his ability to maintain interpersonal relationships. Lin Yuan did not directly agree to the Listening Heron Chamber of Commerce and Listen's allegiance. Instead, he asked Listen to come to his mansion in the royal capital to talk in detail. This was because Lin Yuan was still unaware of the problems that the Listening Heron Chamber of Commerce had encountered. Whether Lin Yuan wanted to control the Listening Heron Chamber of Commerce through Listen, he still needed to fully understand the situation before making a decision. However, Lin Yuan had previously agreed with Listen that Lin Yuan would quickly complete the transaction of Listen using 6 source-type items in exchange for 2 bronze flawless phase to upgrade to epic. It was also considered helping Listen get through the current difficulties. Lin Yuan had a good impression of Listen, so when Listen encountered difficulties, Lin Yuan agreed to the transaction and helped him. However, Lin Yuan wanted to build his own faction and do things that were beneficial to his faction. He would not do useless work because of his benevolent heart and let his faction bring a burden. Lin Yuan wanted to build a sky city on the floating island Whalesback and let it be a cloud hanging in the sky above the 9 heavens. If he could control a power like the Listening Heron Chamber of Commerce in the dark, for Lin Yuan, there would only be benefits and no disadvantages. This was because every power that Lin Yuan could control and hide in the dark could be considered a foundation in Lin Yuan's hands. Such a foundation was far more reliable than the power in the network that Lin Yuan had spread out. This was because white clouds could last for thousands of years, and white clouds could remain unchanged for thousands of years. This was because although the white clouds were floating, they had the world's water as their foundation. As soon as Lin Yuan left the room, he saw Wenyu standing at his door with a few pieces of paper. From time to time, he would use a pen to make changes on these papers. His expression was extremely serious. Upon seeing Lin Yuan come out of the room, Wenyu hurriedly said, "Young master, I was just about to knock on your door to look for you. What do you think of the proposal I wrote for the planning of a private force?" As she said that, she handed the 5 or 6 pieces of paper in her hand to Lin Yuan. His eyes were filled with anticipation. He took the pieces of paper that Wenyu handed over, which clearly stated some of her views on the development of the faction. However, the more he looked, the more he felt that something was wrong. Third update, end of chapter. Chapter 339. Lin Yuan had already established the faction's development route in his previous conversation with Wenyu. Lin Yuan already had a plan in his heart. However, Wenyu had submitted this private faction's construction and views. Lin Yuan still read it very seriously. Through what was written on the paper, Lin Yuan could more intuitively see Wenyu's views and direction on building a faction. At first, Lin Yuan could not help but secretly nod when he read it. Many of Wenyu's ideas really coincided with his own. However, when he continued to read and saw Wenyu's views on other factions, Lin Yuan felt that something was wrong. It was not that Wenyu and Lin Yuan's ideas were different or that Wenyu's views were wrong. It was just that when Wenyu mentioned other factions, her words revealed a feeling. If Lin Yuan had to describe this feeling, it could only be described as a sense of superiority. Lin Yuan felt this sense of superiority in Wenyu's words and quickly understood. As the Radiant Moon Palace's spirit attendant, Wenyu's starting point was not what ordinary people could compare to. Therefore, Wenyu's vision had always been at the level of the Leaning Moon Mountain and the Radiant Moon Palace. Wenyu essentially did not care much about the Radiance Federation's other factions. If Wenyu used this sense of superiority in other aspects, Lin Yuan might have to give her a few words of advice. However, if Lin Yuan started to develop his faction according to his previous strategy of accumulating resources, Lin Yuan felt that there was nothing wrong with Wenyu's sense of superiority. On the contrary, this sense of superiority was a little insufficient. A bronze epic Fey was equivalent to a luxury item for spirit chi professionals. As long as Lin Yuan wanted, he could have a large number of bronze epic Feys. This meant that Lin Yuan could completely establish a luxury dynasty that mainly customized Bronze Epic phase. Every Bronze Epic phase could represent Lin Yuan's private faction's sense of superiority. At the same time, some large veteran factions might also be able to produce the sense of superiority derived from Bronze Epic phase. Although they might not necessarily be as many as Lin Yuan, it could not be said that they did not have the power to contend. However, compared to these large veteran factions, Lin Yuan could casually take out Bronze Epic phase to trade. It could be said that customizing Bronze Epic phase according to the willpower rune was a way for Lin Yuan's private faction to develop and absorb resources. Therefore, Lin Yuan's private faction's sense of superiority was always showing off to his actual faction. Those large veteran factions might have Bronze Epic phase, but they didn't have enough. However, these large veteran factions had always been in high demand for Bronze Epic phase. As long as these large, veteran forces did not collectively go crazy, they would definitely not let their Bronze Epic undead go out. Therefore, Lin Yuan's faction had actually been at the pinnacle of superiority from the beginning. As long as he was willing, he could even take out Bronze Legend phase. Therefore, he could stand at the top of his sense of superiority and look down on the entire chain of contempt of his sense of superiority and look down on the other factions. All of these Bronze Epic phase were sought after by king-class experts in the market. Even if a large-scale veteran faction had a pinnacle Class 4 creation master who was lucky enough to nurture a Bronze Legend phase, it would be impossible to do so. However, would a veteran faction that could produce a Bronze Legend phase be willing to put it on the market? Lin Yuan would not easily let a Bronze Legend phase flow into the market. However, this Bronze Legend phase was the strongest trump card for Lin Yuan's private faction to suppress other factions in terms of superiority. He did not even need anything else. He only needed a Bronze Legend Oath Lily of the Valley. It would be able to clearly indicate to all other factions that Lin Yuan's private faction was not to be trifled with. In fact, compared to a Class 5 creation master, in terms of increasing a phase grade and healing a phase damaged roots, it was simply incomparable. In fact, Lin Yuan could not even compare to a Class 3 creation master in terms of increasing a phase grade and healing its damaged roots. He was only at the level of a Class 2 creation master. However, if it was to nurture a Bronze Legend phase, Lin Yuan did not think he would lose to a Class 5 creation master. In fact, Lin Yuan felt that a Class 5 creation master's ability to nurture Bronze Legend phase was not comparable to his at all. As long as Lin Yuan was willing to take out a Spirit Chi crystal condensed by Morbius Spirit Chi condensation, he would be able to inject it into these Bronze Epic phase. If he injected the Spirit Chi crystals into these Bronze Epic phase, Lin Yuan would be able to harvest at least 5 or even 6 Legend phase. According to this calculation, if Lin Yuan did not use the Spirit Chi crystals to increase the strength of his phase, in that case, he would be able to have a Bronze Legend phase every day on average. This was why Lin Yuan's private faction could be mysterious. It could be noble. It could be superior to other factions in terms of resources. If phase were compared to a luxury goods chain of contempt, then Lin Yuan was now standing at the top of the luxury goods chain of contempt. After reading Wen Yu's views on the private faction's development, Lin Yuan looked up and saw her expectant expression. Lin Yuan nodded firmly and said, "Wen Yu, your thoughts and plans are very good. Wen Yu, your ideas and plans are very good. Many of your views are the same as mine." Upon hearing Lin Yuan's words, Wen Yu's face immediately revealed a joyful expression. Wen Yu was only a young girl who was less than 20 years old, but she was still a young girl. She would be happy and smile when being praised by the person she wanted the most. However, after Lin Yuan affirmed Wen Yu's plan, she heard him say solemnly, "Wen Yu, the superiority in this plan in terms of resources is not enough. Wen Yu, the sense of superiority in this plan is not enough. We have the advantage, so we have the right to be arrogant. The more arrogant we are, the more the other factions will value us, fear us, and be unable to see through us. However, this is only in terms of resources, not in terms of martial power. We're building our own private faction, not the Leaning Moon Mountain or the Radiant Moon Palace. Thus, to the other factions, we're just a newly established faction. We still need time to fully develop our wings. Upon hearing Lin Yuan's words, Wen Yu immediately understood what he meant and could not help but feel a little ashamed. Wen Yu also realized her own problem. While she was thinking about things, she suddenly felt that something was wrong. When she was thinking about things, she would always imperceptibly put the thinking that she had developed in the Leaning Moon Mountain's Radiant Moon Palace into her current thinking. Wen Yu also understood Lin Yuan's determination to build a private faction. A smart person like Wen Yu would not make the same mistake after knowing her problem. Young master, I know where the problem is. I'll go write another one and show it to you. Chapter 4 End of this chapter. Chapter 340. Wen Yu returned to her room and began to write down the development and planning of her new private force. At this time, Hu Quan, the true liver emperor, couldn't bear it anymore and returned to his room to catch up on his sleep. The mother of Bloodbath and Endless Summer ate the 2 big pots of honey pancakes in the morning. Once again, they teamed up and strolled around the streets with a clear goal in mind. However, the mother of Bloodbath and Endless Summer had different goals. The mother of Bloodbath went out to eat all the delicacies it was interested in. On the other hand, Endless Summer's goal was to go to an accessory store to buy spirit accessories that she liked. Yesterday, Endless Summer had gone out to shop with the mother of Bloodbath for half a day. When she returned, she had bought nearly 100 necklaces, rings, bracelets, and brooches of all kinds. In short, the 2 suzerain myth breed phase, the mother of Bloodbath and Endless Summer, had now fallen to the extent that they only knew how to buy things on the streets. It perfectly embodied the importance of eating and loving beauty for women. Liu Jie went straight to the Radiant's Sacred Hall when he started cooking dinner this morning. 2 days later, Liu Jie would use the internal channels to conduct the Radiant's 100 sequence ranking. However, Liu Jie had to do some other tests in the Radiant's Sacred Hall over the next 2 days. Therefore, Liu Jie could not cook in the manor for the next few days. The mother of Bloodbath had taken over the cooking job in the past few days when Liu Jie was not around. The mother of Bloodbath didn't really want to cook in the manor. Instead, it planned to go out for a stroll on the streets for the next 2 days. He brought back the delicacies that he liked and shared them with the people in the manor. Thus, Lin Yuan was the only one left in the hall. Looking at this huge fish tank made of completely jade-textured red sandalwood, Lin Yuan could not help but feel a headache. He really did not know how he was going to fish them out of the red sandalwood longevity fish tank. However, at this moment, the bronze-eye flawless spirit-containing hibiscus at the top of the fish tank was growing more and more prosperous. Many of the bronze-eye flawless spirit-containing hibiscuses had been weakened by the massive spirit chi released by the 5 fortune ranchus. It had advanced to bronze rank 2 or even 3. Although the spirit-containing hibiscuses bloomed in the morning and withered in the evening, it was currently noon. The flower bud of the spirit-containing hibiscus had just opened for a while. The flower was huge and beautiful. It had the artistic conception of the lush green is quiet and tranquil, and the red dress is shallow and deep. During the day, there were large hibiscus flowers dancing with lustrous wings on the red sandalwood fish tank. At night, lustrous winged butterflies flapped their wings and played among the green leaves of the spirit-containing hibiscus. However, he suddenly realized that one of the lustrous winged butterflies was different from the others. The lustrous winged butterfly was a fay that flew in pairs. Those 98 lustrous winged butterflies were flying in a group, but only this lustrous winged butterfly was like a lonely patient. Usually, he would stay far away from the 98 flying lustrous winged butterflies. Moreover, those 98 lustrous winged butterflies seemed to be afraid of this lustrous winged butterfly. However, Lin Yuan did not care too much. He spent a lot of effort to open the mechanism Hu Quan had set on the red sandalwood longevity fish tank. The 3 dragon phoenix landscape carps had been personally nurtured by Lin Yuan. After seeing Lin Yuan, the 3 dragon phoenix landscape carps were very friendly. The 3 dragon phoenix landscape carps were preparing to use their tails to greet Lin Yuan like in the spirit pool. However, since they were already in the red sandalwood longevity fish tank and not in the spirit pool, the 3 dragon phoenix landscape carps were about to use their tails to greet Lin Yuan. The huge fish tails of the 3 dragon phoenix landscape carps, which were almost as long as their bodies, brought about a splash that drenched Lin Yuan's entire body. If Lin Yuan had not stood firmly on the ladder, he would have been slapped to the ground by these 3 sudden splashes of water. Lin Yuan used his hand to wipe the splashes on his face and wet hair and could not help but feel very helpless. He looked at the 3 dragon phoenix landscape carps angrily. He wanted to upgrade the 3 little fellas from Bronze X Epic to Bronze X Legend, but the 3 little fellas actually sent him to change his clothes with 3 splashes. Lin Yuan stored the 3 dragon phoenix landscape carps in the diamond Fey storage box. He went down the ladder and shook his wrist. The amber button-shaped sauce-type sauce sand on his wrist turned into a few strands of yellow sand. These strands of yellow sand sucked up the large water stains on the ground. Then, the sauce sand turned into the shape of an amber button and stuck to Lin Yuan's diamond Fey storage box, which was also in the shape of an amber button. Not long after Lin Yuan fished up the 3 dragon phoenix landscape carps, Ostrich Logistics delivered the wood weaving house centipede and oath lily of the valley that Lin Yuan had purchased to Lin Yuan's mansion. Whether it was the wood weaving house centipede or the oath lily of the valley, Lin Yuan had picked the best growth among the same grade and quality. In particular, this wood weaving house centipede was very lively. Lin Yuan brought the bronze Fey storage box containing the wood weaving house centipede and oath lily of the valley back to his room. Then, he entered the Spirit Lock spatial zone. The Spirit Lock spatial zone was still the same. It was just that the 2 completely jade-textured, crimson parasol wood shelves full of phoenix feathers and phoenix patterns. The surface of the 5 types of rare wood, which had been placed for nearly 10 days, had a certain degree of jade texturing. Under the extremely high spirit chi concentration in the Spirit Lock spatial zone, they were already faintly emitting a jade-textured luster. However, these rare wood that had already become jade-textured would need to be 5 times heavier to completely become jade-textured. Therefore, it would take at least another 20 days. When the grey crane species Fey saw that Lin Yuan had returned to the Spirit Lock spatial zone, it immediately stuck to him. It flapped its wings and used its small head to rub against Lin Yuan's hand that was hanging by the side of his leg. It was obvious that this little fellow was already used to staying in the Spirit Lock spatial zone for a night. Furthermore, this little fellow was playing very well with the wind speed rapid antelope in the Spirit Lock spatial zone and had obviously become good friends. Lin Yuan rubbed this little fellow's small head and sensed the state of its genetic model. Lin Yuan sighed. At this speed, this little fellow wanted to fully display its genetic model. He would probably have to wait until he finished participating in the Radiance 100 sequence test before it could more or less recover. The aquamarine elemental shellfish, celestine elemental shellfish, and scorching elemental shellfish were all absorbing the massive and pure spiritual power in the Spirit Lock spatial zone. They were dutifully spitting out the elemental pearls. The floating island whale was also constantly absorbing the massive and pure water and chi elements produced from the elemental pearls. In addition, the massive and pure spiritual power was slowly developing. At that moment, Lin Yuan cut his palm again and used his blood to deepen the bond with the floating island whale. At the same time, he sensed the floating island whale's condition in the crystal eggshell. After carefully sensing the floating island whale's condition, Lin Yuan had a rough idea in his heart. Chapter 5 End of this chapter. Chapter 341. Even if Morbius grade did not increase, the floating island whale would probably be able to hatch from the crystal eggshell in June next year. Although the twin red pagoda's main flower had only nurtured the lifeform sacrificial fire for over 10 days, Lin Yuan could clearly feel that the lifeform sacrificial fire was constantly growing stronger. It seemed that the burning elemental shellfish's main flower's lifeform sacrificial fire was still very powerful for the twin red pagoda's main flower. It seemed that the scorching elemental shellfish's lifeform sacrificial fire, which contained a huge amount of fire elements, was still very powerful for the twin red pagoda's main flower. Lin Yuan had already given the matured lifeform sacrificial fire to Endless Summer, so he hoped that this lifeform sacrificial fire could mature quickly. Then, Lin Yuan began his goal of enhancing the phase this time. He first placed the 3 dragon phoenix landscape carps in a huge water tank in the Spirit Lock spatial zone. Then, he placed the huge water tank with the 3 dragon phoenix landscape carps on his breeding table. The 3 dragon phoenix landscape carps were now in excellent condition. They were much better than when Lin Yuan had just promoted them to Bronze Epic, be it in terms of physical appearance or spirit. Moreover, their tail fins and wing fins were a bit longer than before. The wider tail fins and wing fins made the dragon phoenix landscape carps more ornamental. However, Lin Yuan also discovered something even more strange about these 3 dragon phoenix landscape carps. Although these 3 dragon phoenix landscape carps looked no different from before, Lin Yuan carefully sensed them now. But now that he sensed it carefully, he realized that while the dragon bloodline and phoenix bloodline were constantly rising, they were also assimilating with each other. This assimilation did not refer to devouring each other, but to accepting each other and slowly fusing into a whole. Lin Yuan had decided that after enhancing these 3 dragon phoenix landscape carps to legend, they would no longer be stuck at bronze and would start to evolve freely. After these 3 bronze epic dragon phoenix landscape carps reached bronze X legend, it should not take long for them to reach silver I legend. It shouldn't take long for it to advance from bronze X legend to silver I legend. The dragon phoenix landscape carps had evolved from the myriad form carp. The myriad form carp's characteristic was that each time it advanced in grade, it would evolve to a certain extent. Therefore, when the dragon phoenix landscape carps evolved to the silver grade, there would definitely be a certain change. After evolving from the manifestation carp to the dragon phoenix landscape carp, its foundation had already been decided. However, he was still very much looking forward to the changes that might occur after the evolution of these 3 dragon phoenix landscape carps. Then, he took the bronze epic dragon's mouth orchid. At that moment, this bronze epic dragon's mouth orchid still looked no different from weeds because it had been plucked off by Lin Yuan previously. The flower bud on the agave orchid had also withered. However, when the dragon's mouth orchid reached the legendary grade, it would naturally grow another stem. There will be another dragon's mouth orchid on the stem. The normal wood weaving house centipede had also been enhanced to bronze X epic. The wood weaving house centipede was about 20 centimeters long, and its dark green body had 100 legs. It was a multi-legged insect. It had to be said that this wood weaving house centipede was somewhat similar to the source-type spine GU that Cheng Rui had contracted. However, the wood weaving house centipede was a very docile insect species Fey. It only ate wood and did not have any aggressiveness. Even if you forced it into a corner, it was rare to hear that the wood weaving house centipede would attack spirit chi professionals when it was in self-defense. It could be considered the representative of I'm ugly but very gentle among insect species Feys. At that time, Lin Yuan had chosen to buy the bronze flawless oath lily of the valley. It was not that there were no bronze normal oath lilies of the valley for sale in the market at that time. It was because this bronze flawless oath lily of the valley's flower branch looked very layered, and the layers were like the shape of a pagoda. It was also full of pure white bell-shaped oath lily of the valley. This pot was considered the most luxuriant and well-trimmed among the pots of oath lilies of the valley that Lin Yuan had seen. Therefore, Lin Yuan had bought this bronze flawless oath lily of the valley. Since the oath lily of the valley was going to evolve into a legend Fey, it was necessary to choose a good base. Lin Yuan upgraded this bronze flawless oath lily of the valley to bronze epic. He looked at the 6 bronze epic Feys in front of him and took a spirit chi crystal. Then, he used force to crush the spirit chi crystal. Morbius, which was on Lin Yuan's wrist, controlled the spirit chi crystal and divided it into 5 portions. It poured into the dragon's mouth orchid, the wood weaving house centipede, and the 3 dragon phoenix landscape carps. After the wood weaving house centipede, the dragon's mouth orchid, and the 3 dragon phoenix landscape carps absorbed the huge amount of pure spirit chi released after the spirit chi crystal was shattered, their quality quickly improved. Finally, after the wood weaving house centipede, the dragon's mouth orchid, and the 3 dragon phoenix landscape carps were upgraded to bronze legend. Only then did Morbius inject the remaining spiritual power in the spirit chi crystal into the bronze epic oath lily of the valley. As a result, this bronze epic oath lily of the valley really lived up to expectations and evolved into a bronze legend oath lily of the valley. Lin Yuan looked at the 6 bronze legend Feys in front of him and revealed a sunny smile. It was not that Lin Yuan was happy because of the preciousness of these 6 bronze legend Feys. It was because when these 6 bronze epic Feys evolved to legend, they actually gave Lin Yuan 2 surprises. The first surprise naturally came from the 3 dragon phoenix landscape carps. Previously, in order to let the 3 dragon phoenix landscape carps reach legend before letting them increase their grade, the dragon phoenix landscape carps had already reached legend. Therefore, Lin Yuan had been suppressing the evolution of the 3 dragon phoenix landscape carps. Therefore, the dragon phoenix landscape carps had already accumulated a lot of spiritual power in their bodies. Now that the 3 dragon phoenix landscape carps reached Bronze X legend, they actually evolved at the same time. The 3 dragon phoenix landscape carps evolving from Bronze X to Silver at the same time could only be considered a small surprise. But immediately after, the 3 dragon phoenix landscape carps gave Lin Yuan an even bigger surprise. Because of Morbius true data, after the 3 dragon phoenix landscape carps evolved to Silver, their names had changed. These 3 dragon phoenix landscape carps should no longer be called dragon phoenix landscape carps. 6th update seeking recommendation votes, monthly votes Life's Passerby's 3rd update is done thank you for your support, Big Boss. End of this chapter. Chapter 342. At that moment, the 3 Bronze X Legend Dragon Phoenix landscape carps were emitting a dazzling brilliance. Although this dazzling brilliance was only black and white, it was ink-like. However, the stone, grass, flower, and tree in the ink-like brilliance formed a house, a pavilion, a platform, and a pavilion. As for the house, the pavilion, the platform, and the pavilion, they formed a city. The city, the mountains, and the rivers formed a house, a pavilion, a platform, and a pavilion. The myriad of cities, mountains, and rivers formed a constantly changing ink-like world. Just as the rivers and mountains were dyed in ink, the ink-like world rose to the apex. The 3 Bronze X Legend Dragon Phoenix landscape carps, which were evolving toward Silver, emitted a dazzling brilliance that formed an ink world. It changed in an instant. The originally black and white world seemed to be injected with 8 kinds of bright and beautiful colors. These 8 kinds of bright and beautiful colors seemed to cater to the most pure colors in nature. Every color seemed to be able to reach the origin of all things. Yellow, red, blue, green, purple, orange, and black. The 8 colors of the universe were immeasurable, and the 8 colors of the formless gave birth to longevity. The 8 colors were immediately bright and beautiful, and the myriad world seemed to have evolved tens of thousands of years of vitality in an instant. Although Lin Yuan could only see the rivers and mountains flowing under the 8 colors, he still couldn't see the Dragon Phoenix landscape carps evolving. However, when Lin Yuan saw the Dragon Phoenix landscape carp's evolved name, a different kind of shock arose in his heart. With the dragon and phoenix bloodlines, solidify the eternal life of mountains and rivers. The Dragon Phoenix landscape carps had already changed their name to Mountain River Eternal Life Carps. After a long time, the Bronze X Legend Dragon Phoenix landscape carps finally completed their evolution to Silver I Legend Mountain River Eternal Life Carps. At that moment, the halo of the 8 bright and beautiful rivers and mountains had completely dissipated. Lin Yuan finally saw what the Silver I Legend Mountain River Eternal Life Carps looked like. The Mountain River Eternal Life Carps were actually not much different from the previous Dragon Phoenix landscape carps. However, the Mountain River Eternal Life Carps and the Dragon Phoenix landscape carps gave Lin Yuan a completely different feeling. If the Dragon Phoenix landscape carps gave Lin Yuan the feeling that they were praising the beauty of mountains and rivers, in that case, the Mountain River Eternal Life Carp gave him the feeling that it was guarding the splendid land's fortune. Lin Yuan took a closer look at the Mountain River Eternal Life Carp, which had 8 bright colors instead of the ink color, and his pupils constricted. The Mountain River Eternal Life Carp's myriad miles of rivers and mountains painting had become even more complicated. As the saying goes, the 4 directions welcome the 8 colors, and the 8 colors give birth to 6 blessings. Aside from the fact that the myriad phenomena on the Mountain and River Eternal Life Carp's back were moving faster, there were also many more fortune and longevity runes. The Happy Bat longevity mark appeared on the fish's forehead, signifying a flood of good fortune. The fish's eyes gave birth to the longevity mark, implying that it was bright and clear. The fins had the pine deer longevity pattern, implying that the pine deer and deer lived together in spring. The belly of the fish was marked with a golden pomegranate, which meant that the pomegranate would blossom into 100 seeds. The fish scales bore the mark of an orchid, implying longevity of an orchid. Jiang Wu's longevity mark was carved on the fish's tail, implying boundless longevity. The everlasting rivers and mountains rune fell on the back of the fish, revealing its stature. Lin Yuan carefully distinguished and found that there were a total of 6 types of fortune and longevity words, which just happened to imply good fortune. The 6 types of fortune and longevity runes on the mountain river eternal life carp's back and the 8 colors of mountains and rivers flowed like a kind of immeasurable blessing. Yang Shan his lifespan, immeasurable blessings. The mountain river eternal life carp might seem abnormally crowded in this narrow water tank. One simply couldn't see the mountain river eternal life carp's excellent posture. However, even in this narrow water tank, just the ripples created by the mountain river eternal life carp's swaying tail and fin contrasted with the magnificent colors on its body, as though it could bloom thousands of fragrant flowers. Just one flower would make one reminisce for a long time. Lin Yuan looked at the 3 mountain river eternal life carps and thought to himself. If the previous 3 dragon phoenix landscape carps could be considered superior auspicious signs, then these 3 mountain river eternal life carps could be considered supreme grade auspicious signs at the very least. It could even be said that they had already surpassed the auspicious signs category. Lin Yuan couldn't bear to see these 3 mountain river eternal life carps squeezed in this water tank, so he simply stored them in the diamond face storage box. When it was time to go out, he would put them back into the red sandalwood longevity fish tank made of completely jade-textured red sandalwood. This time, he had enhanced these 6 fays from Bronze Epic to Bronze Legend and brought a total of 2 surprises to Lin Yuan. However, compared to the 3 Dragon Phoenix Landscape Carp's evolution from Bronze to Silver to Mountain River Eternal Life Carps, the remaining small surprise seemed insignificant. However, this small surprise would probably make Hu Quan so happy that he wouldn't sleep for 3 days and 3 nights. As a tool, Hu Quan's happiness wouldn't diminish even if he worked for another 10 hours every day to celebrate for a year. As a tool, Hu Quan's happiness wouldn't diminish even if he worked for another 10 hours every day to celebrate for a year. This was because the wood weaving house centipede that Hu Quan had given to him had mutated when it had been enhanced to Bronze X Legend. Of course, this mutation couldn't be called evolution. This mutation referred to the wood weaving house centipede's wood weaving silk sac at its tail splitting into 2. The wood weaving house centipede's silk sac splitting was similar to Lin Yuan's succulent jasmine lily's colony growth. The colony growth mutation caused the jasmine lily to change from a single flower head to a multiple flower head. Although the total healing energy in the jasmine lily's body did not change, it could transform single-target healing into group healing. It could also automatically switch between single-target healing and group healing according to Lin Yuan's will. The wood weaving house centipede's silk sac splitting was the same. The wood weaving house centipede could eat wood and turn it into a liquid state in its body. Finally, the silk sac at the wood weaving house centipede's tail would eject tough threads made of wood. This was because the wood weaving house centipede's speed of decomposing wood did not change. Therefore, even if the wood weaving house centipede's silk sac split into 2, the total amount of wood threads that could be ejected would still remain the same. However, the wood weaving house centipede's silk sac splitting into 2 was not as simple as saving time and efficiency for a spirit craftsman. The double threads ejected from the 2 silk sacs could allow a spirit craftsman to use double the number of threads to create. Not only could it save more effort for the spirit craftsman, but it could also increase the possibility of products made from wood. This could be used for a full month. Moreover, as long as the wood weaving house centipede's grade was high enough, the efficiency of decomposing wood would be faster. In fact, to a certain extent, the wood weaving house centipede's silk sac splitting mutation could indeed allow a spirit craftsman's ability to produce wood to achieve double the effect. Hu Quan, who was already a top-notch tool, had become even more valiant. As long as Hu Quan fused the Bronze X Legend wood weaving house centipede with the willpower rune and the fantasy breed jade saber mantis from before, he would have 2 fantasy breed fays. This way, Hu Quan would have 2 fantasy breed fays, and his spirit craftsman standard had long reached the standard of a class 5 spirit craftsman. As long as he went to the Spirit Craftsman Association for certification, Hu Quan would be a true class 5 spirit craftsman. The Mountain and River Eternal Life Carp wrote several times and finally chose this tilde. I hope everyone likes it. Asking for tickets tilde today's first time is even better. End of this chapter. Chapter 343. As for the bronze epic Oath Lily of the Valley, its appearance did not change much after evolving to bronze legend. However, the pagoda-shaped Oath Lily of the Valley's pure white bell-shaped flowers bloomed. The moment it was promoted to legend, a layer of lustrous white flowing light appeared. It was as if every single pure white bell-shaped flower had lit up in an instant. Coupled with the pagoda-shaped plant's shape, it looked like a tree of bell-shaped nephrite. It gave off a feeling of riches and honor. The flowing light in the pure white bell-shaped flower was the reason why the Oath Lily of the Valley could carry oaths. Or it could be said that the rippling light was actually a kind of curse in essence. The legend Oath Lily of the Valley's flower was a container to store oaths and also a curse to seal the willpower rune of the betrayer. Lin Yuan did not pay much attention to this bronze legend Oath Lily of the Valley and kept it in the amber button-shaped diamond fey storage box. This bronze legend Oath Lily of the Valley was not something Lin Yuan used often, so there was no need to put it in the Spirit Lock spatial zone. The resources in the Spirit Lock spatial zone were already tight, and putting it in the Spirit Lock spatial zone would undoubtedly take up space. He just had to buy an area on Star Web to build his faction. He could place this bronze legend Oath Lily of the Valley in his faction's room. There was only one bronze epic fey left that Lin Yuan had yet to check. The last fey, which was the Dragon's Mouth Orchid that had been promoted from bronze epic to legend, had truly broadened Lin Yuan's horizons. Lin Yuan did not know what changes would occur when the Dragon's Mouth Orchid evolved from epic to legend. For example, when the Dragon's Mouth Orchid bloomed, the Dragon's Mouth Orchid would be light blue when it was at the perfect rank, but when it reached the epic rank, it would be dark blue. However, Lin Yuan did not expect the Dragon's Mouth Orchid to actually turn completely black when it reached legend. A huge black Dragon's Mouth Orchid flower was much bigger than Lin Yuan's palm. The dark blue Dragon's Mouth Orchid flower's stamen had a layer of shiny scale-like wood structure. Now, this black bronze legend Dragon's Mouth Orchid flower's stamen looked like bright diamonds. This was a sign of wood crystallization. As early as when the Dragon's Mouth Orchid had been promoted to legend, Lin Yuan had smelled its scent. However, the smell emitted by the legendary Dragon God Orchid was already somewhat fragrant and stinky. The smell was so fragrant that it smelled bad, and there was a taste that was as stimulating as liquor. This smell was the unique smell of dragon species phase. Lin Yuan finally broke off the huge black legend Dragon's Mouth Orchid from the Dragon's Mouth Orchid stem. It had to be said that this ink-black legendary quality agave orchid was quite sturdy. Previously, using a spirit chi crystal to enhance these 6 bronze epic phase to legend was just a small matter. Now, he had to truly enhance his own fey. Lin Yuan wanted to enhance the Bronze X Legend Spirit Gather Goldfish, Blackie, that Morbius had spirit locked. Lin Yuan walked to the side of the spirit pool and found that Blackie was leisurely eating the butterfly shell flowers at the bottom of the pool. After Blackie reached bronze, the butterfly shell flowers that Lin Yuan fed it had also increased by a grade. The butterfly shell flowers that Lin Yuan had fed Blackie were just low-grade butterfly shells that lived in the shallow sea and were carved from them. The butterfly shell flowers that Lin Yuan fed Blackie were high-grade butterfly shells that were produced in the deep sea and were carved from a small number of high-grade ones. Although it could not be said that high-grade butterfly shells were priceless in the market, they were still very expensive. Under normal circumstances, very few people would be willing to use high-grade deep-sea butterfly shells to let fays eat casually. After all, although the flower could stimulate the dragon species bloodline in the fae, the effect of stimulating the bloodline was mainly nurturing and auxiliary. However, the effect of activating the bloodline was mainly based on nurturing, and there wouldn't be any effect in the short term. This was also why Lin Yuan had been feeding Blackie so many butterfly shell flowers. However, when Blackie had stimulated its dragon species bloodline, it had used 3 drops of dragon species phase essence blood for the first time. The second time, he planned to use the legend Dragon's Mouth Orchid flowers. However, he did not feel that it was a waste for Blackie to eat the butterfly shell flower carved from the deep-sea butterfly shells. Because of the accumulation of the past few months. Lin Yuan could sense that the trace of dragon species bloodline hidden in the spirit-gather goldfish's bodies was becoming more and more active after eating the butterfly shell flowers carved from the expensive deep-sea butterfly shells. However, if one stared at the spirit-gather goldfish Blackie every day, they wouldn't be able to see it. However, if he were to look at it once every 1 or 2 months, he would still be able to see that faint dragon species phase pressure constantly accumulating in Blackie's body. It was as if it was waiting for a complete transformation. Lin Yuan looked at the huge black legend dragon's mouth orchid flower in his hand with great anticipation. Lin Yuan was not prepared to let Blackie immediately undergo a drastic transformation into a dragon species Fae after eating this dragon's mouth orchid flower. However, this legend dragon's mouth orchid flower would definitely allow Blackie to comprehensively cleanse its bloodline and greatly strengthen its trace of dragon species Fae bloodline. It might even completely suppress the fish's comprehended bloodline. It would allow the dragon species Fae's bloodline to occupy the dominant position in Blackie's body. This was because Lin Yuan did not know the effect of the legend dragon's mouth orchid flower. In fact, Lin Yuan still placed the treasure of Blackie's evolution into a dragon species Fae on the moment it evolved into a fantasy breed Fae. Blackie sensed Lin Yuan's arrival and immediately swam to the side of the spirit pool. It used its black velvet peony-like tail to whip the spirit pool's surface, creating splashes as it greeted Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan watched as Blackie used its tail to whip the water. He felt that this spirit-gather goldfish and the 3 dragon phoenix landscape carps greeted each other in the same way. Lin Yuan thought that if he were to lie at the side of the pool, he might get wet from the splashes from Blackie's whipping. At that moment, Lin Yuan fished out the 5 fortune ranchus, which had evolved to bronze, from the spirit pool. He also placed the female 5 fortune ranchus, which Blackie had a good time with, in the water tank where the 3 mountain river eternal life carps were stored. This was the moment when Blackie would once again stimulate its dragon species bloodline. Today's second update. End of this chapter.